All right, welcome to the Mormon News Roundup. This is your humble host, and this is the Mormon Movie Reviews. We're going to be looking at the church's anti-abortion propaganda film, Very Much Alive, released in 1976. We got a big episode. Not only that, I'm joined by my fabulous co-host, Maven. Maven, how's it going?
Good. How's everybody?
This is going to be absolutely off the hook. This is going to be great. Now, what are we reviewing tonight, Maven? What is this all about?
So tonight, I'm here at your invitation to review this video, and we had previously gone over some parts of it on the last Mormon News Roundup that I co-hosted with you. I spoke about it then, and I've spoken about it with friends for a while now about wanting to start a reproductive rights channel, and I've just really struggled to kind of get myself out the door. So I asked Dives if I could kind of simulcast with my channel and make this kind of an unofficial launch and hopefully kind of push me through that barrier of getting started. And you very graciously said yes. So I very much appreciate that. So this is a movie review and a channel launch. There'll be links in the description and maybe throughout. We'll throw some up as well. But yeah, so do you want me to jump into the video or do you want to?
Yeah, let me just say one other thing. We're streaming this on the Mormon Movie Reviews and the Mormon News Roundup. We're also streaming on She Became Visible, which is hosted by Renee Steelman, Lila Tuller, and also on Maven. And then it's also on your channel. What is the name of your new YouTube channel?
So it's actually not on my new YouTube channel just yet because there's apparently a 24 to 48 hour waiting period. But it's called Dear Pro-Life Dad. That's the name of it. And let me see. I think the link for that is in the description already, but we can maybe throw it up in the chat as well. But yeah, that's what it's going to be. And if you want to go ahead and support and become a subscriber, although there's no content there yet, this will be put there as well as some other things, and that's going to be the main channel for it. So yeah,
that sounds fantastic. Now we are queuing up. The church released only one anti-abortion propaganda film. It was released in 1976, and it was a result of the passing of Roe versus Wade, which the church looked at as a negative thing. And it took them a couple of years, but they responded to that very rigorously in a film strip. This was back in the time frame when the church didn't release as many live movies as they do now. The church released film strips all the way up until the 1980s. So what this film strip is all about is it's the idea that you're bringing in someone into a chapel who's probably pregnant, and it was used to indoctrinate them as to the evils of abortion. And we're going to talk about some of the straw men that the church trots out in this. And a lot of this review, I am going to be giving this review myself because it's part of the Mormon Movie Reviews. But Maven, definitely need you to join in. Anytime that there's something that you want to comment on, you just hit the pause, hit the stop, and let us know. And I welcome any pushback. If you think you haven't seen my review of this, right? You haven't watched it before, right?
not
right.
the full thing.
Yeah. So if I get something wrong, or if you have an issue with it, or you think I've mischaracterized something, or if you just think there's something that could be better said or something that I've missed, I'm definitely grateful for that. And for those of you out there in virtual land, you can see the link that's in the description. Also, that's running along the bottom of the screen at the end of the show after this review. This is a 14-minute film. At the end of the film strip, we welcome anyone out there to contact and call in, and let's have a discussion about reproductive rights or the church's stance on abortion or anything that's related to this sphere. Is there anything else we need to cover here, Maven?
No, I was going to say we can jump right in, but actually before we do that, I did just want to preface with a few things to keep in mind, because this area of pro-life and pro-choice is one that is just really inundated with a lot of misinformation. And it's one of the things that even, in the deconstruction sphere can be something that's kind of late coming. A lot of other things that the church gives us might be easier to deconstruct than this, because on the surface, it sounds really good, pro-life. That sounds beautiful. And it's, supposedly pro-baby. And so, and that's if you don't know more about it. So anyway, not everybody, like I said, not everybody deconstructs this. I actually deconstructed this while I was still a member of the church. So still a believer. I switched from pro-life to pro-choice, which to me is the real pro-life. It's the most pro-life option for, just all across the board. But anyway, from my study of this, I feel like to have the pro-life mindset, or if that's your viewpoint, it's we're really looking at a deep human rights issue when it comes to bodily autonomy and consent. And so I know it might feel good and feel righteous to be on that side, but there's three factors, I think, that every pro-lifer is, oh, sorry, I'm struggling with my words. Thanks everybody for your patience. But three, I guess three characteristics. All right. And so that's misogyny, which is the hatred of women, or just the lackluster care about their pain and suffering, or their voice of just even listening to them and letting them have autonomy. The second would be ignorance, which I think is the easiest one to kind of move past from. It's all you need is knowledge, and when you have the right knowledge, I think most people do turn to pro-choice, unless there is like that misogyny bit there, if there really is just this disdain for women. And then the last characteristic is hypocrisy. Almost every pro-life person and every pro-life position or argument has some like a hypocritical counterpart, almost like straight across the board. So that's one thing I wanted to start with. And then I guess I wanted to explain when I say this is a human rights issue and we're talking about bodily autonomy. I think most people understand that if you're causing bodily harm to someone, whether that's abuse, like physical abuse, or even mental or psychological abuse, but especially violations, like rape, we understand that that is violence towards that person's body, and consent is the thing that makes the difference between that, because that's the difference between rape and then a loving consensual encounter with your spouse or loved one. It could be the same act, but the consent is what makes it something that's enjoyable and loving and very fulfilling part of life, versus something that is torture, literally, and can have lifelong consequences for the psyche and the health of the person experiencing that against their will. And so for some reason, where we're at as a society, we're not quite there yet to see pregnancy that way, although we should. It's definitely a much longer and more against the will of somebody. It's much more violent than a rape when we're looking at scale and also length of time. And so anyway, the real difference between the pro-life and the pro-choice side is who is granted personhood. So when you have somebody who's pregnant, the people who are on the pro-choice side value the whole human being that already exists, has a life, has a name, has friends and family and loved ones, and all of that, and should have the ability to make choices about their body. And it's not that we don't care about the fetus or the baby growing inside, but they are not cared about more than or above and beyond the personhood of the mother. And so the pro-life side is the opposite of that. If there's going to be consideration given to one at the expense of the other, they will give it to the fetus. And the mother, the whole person who has them inside, they are relegated to a lesser status. They have rights taken away from them, and given to something that doesn't even have the ability to express or any kind of desire or want for those rights. And that's what's really inherently unfair, and not just unfair, but genuinely torture when you force this on somebody that does not want it. So we're going to talk about that. And when we watch this video, the church will give a lot of straw men, like Dives said, about supposed arguments for abortion. And I just want you to pay attention throughout the whole video, how often the church even acknowledges the person who is pregnant. And then one more thing I wanted to add is that besides when it comes to abortion bans, the other part of this, and this is part of the misogyny, when people are confused about that and they're like, I really don't feel like I hate women, or it's not that I want to punish women, or I don't want women to suffer, but I do feel like they should be forced to carry to term a pregnancy they don't want. What we're doing is basically saying that half of the population, of the whole country, cannot be trusted to make this decision, and it needs to be given to the other half. So we're talking about, full adults who, if they're male, they feel very comfortable and confident making drastic choices for someone else when they're not the ones that will experience the outcome of these choices. But when you look at the person experiencing it, whether they can be a child, but when they're an adult, even, you would think that they should be able to make their own medical decisions, and they can in every other way. So it's almost kind of like a power of attorney kind of a type situation where these decisions that should belong to the person whose body it is and between them and their medical professional is being taken over by people in ways that we do for people who like the elderly, if they're losing cognizance and they're losing the ability to make these choices. It should be a big deal when we think about doing that. And in this debate, apparently for whatever reason many people feel comfortable doing that. And then the last thing is, I'll bring this up throughout too, is just the idea, the difference between reality versus theory. So I feel a lot of people on the pro-life stage of things will say things that just don't match what is actually happening out in the real world. And so it might be a nice idea that they have. I would agree that every child should be wanted, but just saying that doesn't mean that every child is. Saying that you want every child to be taken care of just doesn't do anything to change reality around us. And so we need to deal with what is actually happening. So those are the themes I think that we'll kind of keep an eye on as we go forward.
There's going to be a lot of themes on this particular one. We're going to see in particular how the church really tries to tackle this issue. And we're going to see what we're going to see in this video review is the church continuously punt on the most important issues of really where the rubber meets the road. And we also get to see that the church's vision, which was very regressive, even more regressive in 1976 than it is now. The church has softened its stand on abortion continuously since this particular time frame, because President Kimball, who was the president of the church in 1976, he was extremely aggressive in his anti-abortion views, and the church has since moderated those views. But we've seen since the repeal of Roe versus Wade recently, the church's vision come to fruition, and the harm that has caused to women, untold suffering, untold death. So the church espoused the vision in this film in 1976. That vision has come to reality, and it's caused immense harm. If you go back and look at John Larson, who started, the Mormon Expressions podcast, he started a new channel, and he gave a great podcast right after Roe versus Wade was overturned, and said, what happens when the dog catches the car? And he talked about the harm that has come from that. So it's an immense amount of harm. And this video is really insane in the level of propaganda, straw men, bad arguments, mansplaining, and all kinds of other BS that the church puts forward. Now, I just want to say one thing. I don't have any expertise in this field, but it is an important thing to do. And this is the only review that has ever been done on this film, is very much live, as the one that you're about to watch. So I felt like it was important. I obviously don't have a lot of knowledge on this, so I'm ready, Maven. If I get anything wrong, I want you to set me straight. I'm willing to be corrected. So without anything else, I think we're ready to cue this puppy up, right?
Can we address a comment actually already?
Yeah, sure.
And I want to say I'm not an expert necessarily either. There's a lot of information that I'm always continually seeking out, but I would feel comfortable saying more than the average person. So yeah, I wanted to address this comment. This is from Alan. He says the Supreme Court was correct in sending the abortion issue back to the states because the federal government has no constitutional authority to be involved in abortion. And once again, I just want to point out here that in sending it back to the states and this idea that the federal government has no say in this, I hear it from pro-lifers. I strongly suspect that if the federal government, you say if there's another Trump presidency, heaven help us, and abortion is banned across the country, I don't know, Alan, if you will also be saying the same thing again, as that this should be sent back to the states. Because frankly, this issue of states' rights, when you're talking about states' rights over another person's body, we're talking about really disgusting things here. And the only other time that I know the issues were really strongly considered states' rights, I think it's a false flag for owning and controlling other people. And the only other scenario I know of is slavery. So it's just really convenient that when it comes to controlling other people's lives and bodies and health, that's always when it comes down to a state's issue. I have a huge problem with that because I am not breeding stock for my state nor the federal government. And in the Supreme Court's ruling, the Supreme Court wasn't mandating that. It was saying that we should have the right to privacy, which also includes I guess it kind of like, it didn't actually specifically say we have the right to choose, I think, but it's kind of involved in that. If you have the right to privacy, it's nobody else's business. You can't be, it can't be criminalized. You can't get arrested for it, etc. So anyway, yeah, I just would like to invite you to think about that, Alan. I don't know how you would feel if men's fertility became a states' rights issue, and some states were really gung-ho on sterilization, and others were maybe giving out mandatory minimums or something. It's harder because men have it a little easier on the reproductive side of things, but I think you would have a problem with the idea of reproductive decisions belonging to your state, and I do too. So that's it.
I mean, this really brings forth, I know there's a lot of preamble before the show.
Yeah.
This really brings up the fact that this should never have been set as a Supreme Court precedent, because that means that we don't have the buy-in from our constituency that is necessary in order to galvanize the nation. And maybe this is an issue that couldn't have been galvanized, but you think that back when Obama was elected, he had, for one of the first times in a long time, he had both of the chambers of Congress and he had the executive branch. So he had all three branches of government ready to line up. And you think if any point in time that we could have passed some legislation to codify the women's right for reproductive services, Obama was definitely a pro-choice individual, that would have been the time to do it. And guess what we did? We did nothing during that time. And that's because of the senators in states in which are, the swing states, they didn't want to take this issue on. And it seems like we're never going to take this issue on a federal level in order to really make it so that people are not having to drive long distances or go across state lines, or people are denied health, life-saving services for themselves just because they live in a red state. So
right.
there's a lot of
I'm
issues
hoping that we can, because I do feel like for a long time I always had been told, and I really trusted, that while the Republican Party likes to talk about abortion, it's an easy way to get votes if you're a Republican candidate for any kind of electoral office, but that deep down they knew what a terrible idea it would be to do that. Basically what we're seeing now is that there's a huge backlash against the party, and if they do end up being having a downfall, it will be because of this issue. So I thought it was safe, and I think a lot of the Democrats also just in general thought, Republicans talk the talk, but they're not going to actually do it, and we were all very, very wrong about that. So that's what I'm thinking there. And then one more thing about what Alan said. When you say that this is a states' rights, this is something that my dad said to me, and is one of the reasons that I just couldn't handle being in a relationship with him anymore over that. What you're saying is, when states like Alabama want to give personhood to embryos, which affects IVF, or when states like Texas or Idaho literally would prefer that pregnant women die rather than have to give them life-saving support if they'll be the ones that feel like, by their hands, they've terminated a pregnancy or, ended the life of a fetus or a baby. You're saying that that's okay. Or when other states are talking about, because it's not just abortion, it's reproduction, period. So some states are already wanting to go after contraception. So you're saying that's okay, that if it's okay for women, in one state to basically be forced to breed against their will, especially if they can't get contraception, or if they're raped, there's plenty of places that don't want rape exceptions, or even health exceptions. You're saying that that's okay. Whereas women in a blue state are able to get these things, are able to live, are able to have an abortion when they're not ready and become a mother when they are. It's just, why is it okay in your mind for some women to get the healthcare they need to save their lives even, whereas other women don't deserve that? I think it's a really disgusting take. So you are muted, friend.
And if we have time, we're going to also talk about what's happening in Utah, which is the church's home court, with regards to the Utah Supreme Court recently ruled onto enforcement of the state's near total abortion ban. If we have time, we'll try to get to that at the end. Like I said, we have a show note here that goes along the bottom. If you want to join the show, give a call in. welcome the pushback, welcome the haters, bring it on. We're ready for you, and let the best arguments win. But without further ado, we are going to cue this one up here. We could talk about the preamble for a long time, but let's cue up Very Much Alive, one of the most bizarre films that the church ever put together. And let's see how it goes. We'll take it from here. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to Mormon Movie Reviews, where LDS movie lovers belong. My name is Dives, and today is November 1st, 2022, and we will be reviewing Very Much Alive in 1976 with a running time of 14 minutes. Warning for those who are triggered by disturbing images, this film strip features potentially alarming images of dead fetuses and dismembered body parts. Your synopsis. This strongly pro-life film strip shows the wonders of life, the sanctity of the unborn, and warns of the psychological stresses and satanic influence and physical dangers of abortion. Now, some background. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints developed this film strip with the intent that it be shared with members and secular audiences. It targeted young adults, Relief Society sisters, and students in seminaries and institutes. It was even briefly incorporated into the sexual education curriculum in Coleman, Texas. Now, the LDS Church lauded this short in several articles in the Deseret News and the Ensign magazine as a wonderful PR tool to educate and improve the public perception of the church. Now, when played for Mormons, it was accompanied by an audio-only recording by President Kimball. Well, if you want to get in touch with me, my email is mormonmoviereviews@gmail.com. Now, it's really difficult for me to do this review as a white, older male. I tried to get a female co-host, but I failed, so I am going to do my best. We're going to watch the one that was intended for a secular audience, and then we're going to go back and watch the version that was intended mostly for an LDS audience.
23 very special chromosomes met 23 other special chromosomes, your body began. Smaller than a dot. You grew and were born.
Skip straight from being a dot to being fully formed and being a human baby. The film does not want to show the early stages of human development right after conception. It wants to give the impression that immediately after fertilization, we have a fully formed human. So this is what it looks like when you are starting to have a fully formed fetus. This is the first 4 weeks. It does not look like a human in really any way, shape, or form. So right off the bat, we know that this is not an educational video. It's an anti-abortion propaganda video. It is not interested in educating us.
And grew some more. And now.
Okay. Or should we do it this way, maybe? Okay. I just wanted to jump in real quick, just to add again, when you're looking at autonomy, we're talking about the right to choose for ourselves. So the idea of when life starts doesn't really matter, because there's no point where we ever allow one human to be killed or to have organs harvested from them, even to save the life of another person, even if it's an extra organ, say a kidney or something, and the first person can supposedly survive that, and that's fine, and we're just spreading life around to somebody else. We do not do that, and we do not even do that for dead people. If you are a corpse and you have not signed off permission to allow your organs to be used, we respect that so much that we don't do that. So it's a fundamental human right that you should not have your body be made to improve anybody's life or even keep them alive against your will. Everything is voluntary. So I don't really care where you want to start life. That's not the issue. We're still saying we are taking personhood away from the owner of the uterus, and we are giving it to the unborn. So that's what's not okay about this. And that's where we are literally torturing another person to bring a life into the world. You're muted again.
It's like I've never done this before, but you're going to you hear the bizarre music that's behind. It's very upbeat and it's very lively. And then we're showing pictures of BYU football players. I mean, what does this have to do with anything? You will see in this film an incredibly strange juxtaposition of odd music and nonsensical pictures to go along with this very serious subject. So let's continue on, though.
Now, even with life's many problems, it's great to be alive.
especially if you're part of God's only true church.
Some of these problems over the years are extremely difficult. But what a joy it can be to help those who have problems and to share their love.
Why are people born with Down syndrome, or limbs that don't work correctly, or brains that are not fully formed? Well, we have the answer to that given to us by President Lee, who was the president of the church just before this film was shot. He said, "This privilege of obtaining a mortal body on this earth is seemingly so priceless that those in the spirit world, even though unfaithful or not valiant, were undoubtedly permitted to take mortal bodies, although under penalty of racial or physical or national limitations."
Caring and loving and helping really changed the life of this baby, who now is a happy little boy.
Yay!
And this little girl was born with a complicated problem. Even though the situation was almost hopeless, everyone in her life helped, giving her a chance to live. Now she is healthy in every way and is very much alive.
Film, it seems to be arguing that women should carry babies to term, even if those babies have a very poor chance of survival or will be facing serious mental or physical obstacles. The narrator says that the chances for this girl's survival were almost hopeless. But what if the odds are actually hopeless, not just mostly hopeless? What if they are actually hopeless? That's a little bit different. I just want to show you the story here of Erica Goldblatt Hyatt here, whose child was not going to live to term. During her second trimester, Erica Hyatt learned that her son had a rare condition and he would likely not make it to term. It was her first baby. He was diagnosed with congenital high airway obstruction syndrome because his trachea did not fully form. He also had a chromosomal abnormality, trisomy 16, which frequently led to miscarriage. So he's facing multiple serious issues. Goldblatt Hyatt said her husband consulted with the fetal surgeons as some babies with the syndrome could undergo surgery after birth. But their son's case was too severe. Doctors told her if the baby didn't die of heart failure in the womb, he would be born brain dead. The couple struggled, prayed, and decided to end the pregnancy. So she tweeted out here, "I had a second trimester abortion. Our son never formed an airway. He had no esophagus. Had he survived birth, he would have been brain dead. That wasn't the life that I wanted for him. It was the first true parenting decision I ever made. I am not a monster or a criminal."
Yeah, so let's just talk about that real quick, Maven. What about the children who are born with absolutely no chance? That this film wants to dodge that and very important question. It's always going to put forward, well, if you give it a chance, maybe your baby will survive, even if it's 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of 1,000,000, 1 out of 1,000,000,000. It never wants to deal with the elephant in the room. Well, what if there is no chance for your baby to ever really have any meaningful life? It will be born stillborn. It will be born brain dead. It will be born with serious abnormalities, which will mean that it will, be totally unviable. The church dodges these very important questions.
I want to see. I'm going to try to share a video here real quick. Hold on one moment, and hopefully this sound will come up as well. Let's see. I guess we might be getting political here, but this is a campaign ad, and it goes into this as well. Let me know if you guys have any issue.
In this election, we each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in? There are some people who think we should be a country of chaos, of fear, of hate. But us?
Sorry, this isn't the one that I am thinking of.
Well,
so
while you go ahead and look for that video. Let's continue.
Yeah, I'll look for it.
But find that video.
Yeah, let me say some other things. We'll just leave it. I'll maybe we can put it in the show notes. But it's the story, of a couple similar to the one that you showed, where they were forced to carry a pregnancy to term. And the thing is, again, this is where people who are thinking that they're pro-life, thinking that they're defending, vulnerable people who can't speak for themselves. They are not, because it's not just traumatizing to parents who wanted a baby who's not going to survive, but it's adding torture and suffering to the child, because if it's only going to suffer, and in the example in the video that I was looking for, the child was born alive, but it struggled and gasped for air for hours. And I think if you have not gone through that, if you don't know what it feels like to not have enough air, to feel like you're slowly drowning, that is a really torturous way to die. And that's all that baby ever knew. Its life was just suffering a slow and torturous death from the time that it was born. And you're also forcing the parents to watch that and be helpless and not be able to do anything for that kid. It's incredibly cruel to everyone involved. And then with the US's healthcare as well, you're hitting them with a huge hospital bill on top of that, because it just gets more and more expensive as you go. So that's just an additional prize that you get from watching your baby suffer and die. First of all, going through the birth, and then watching your baby suffer and die. Now you get a big medical bill for that. It's incredibly inhumane and heartless for the baby and the parents.
We're going to see the church continuously dodge this very important question. And so that's what we know, that this is a propaganda film, because it doesn't deal with important questions and it just dodges everything. So it's not an educational film. It's something that is
What about death before
it's just a propaganda film. Let's keep it going.
birth? Yep. The lives of millions of unborn babies end in abortion. Some excuse abortion by saying that an embryo is more like a blueprint than a human being.
Again, we have an abject failure to show what a fetus looks like in embryo. Instead, we're showing blueprints instead of what we should be showing as fetuses. I guess I need to do the job for the film for it, because this is what you really should be showing is this.
Despite the hurdles,
since you have the film up, or this comment up, I'm going to address it. This really cowardly comment just goes to show what this is ultimately about. It's rage and a desire to control women having sex. That's what it is, because it takes two to have sex, but it's always coming down to the woman. The woman should keep her legs closed, and it's never the man should keep his dick in his pants. So this is where the misogyny is. When you spout stuff like this, abortions are done because of unprotected sex, and it's under the quote unquote guise of women's health. I want to say, DL, fuck you. It is women's health. So shut up.
We'll see the church in this as well double down with the same type of narrative. In fact, we'll see President Kimball himself say that lots of abortions are the result of so-called immorality. That's what he wants to beat the drum on. And going back to the review, though, the church never wants to educate you as far as what's happening to your body during the pregnancy process. They just want to beat it into you that anytime that you terminate a pregnancy, that's immoral, and they don't want to show you the steps along the way. That's where I take a small digression here and talk about those particular steps. So let's check that out for a minute.
Scientists do know a bit about what happens in those critical weeks, often from animal studies or rare human tissue samples. They know that sperm fertilizes egg, and one cell grows to 2, 4, 8, and so on. Around day 5 or 6, the blob starts to feature different types of cell. Scientists call this blob a blastocyst. All being well, the cells in the blastocyst begin to differentiate. 1 week in, it implants into the wall of the uterus. What happens next has been a bit of a mystery. By implanting itself into the womb's wall, the embryo basically hides, and that makes studying it in humans impossible. One way of exploring this crucial time is to study embryos donated by people who no longer need them for fertility treatment. In the last few years, several labs have developed new ways to nurture these embryos. Their techniques have allowed them to start building a picture of human development that's more detailed than ever before. Here's a day 6 embryo growing in a lab. Cells destined to become the actual fetus are tagged in green. Those that go on to form the placenta in blue. By day 8, the cells are sorting and arranging themselves. The green fetal cells have condensed together, and in red here are cells that will form the interface between the baby and the placenta. It seems these extra embryonic structures develop a little later in humans than expected from studies in other animals. Day 10. The whole thing increases in size, and bundles of cells start developing into support structures. Surprisingly, at this stage, the embryo can direct its own development with no input from the mother's tissues. By day 12, the outskirts of the embryo are preparing to bind more strongly to the wall of the uterus. After all, if this were a natural pregnancy, the embryo would be there for the next 9 months. You can even see little holes appearing, ready for the mother's blood vessels to start supplying the embryo with essential oxygen and nutrients.
We're not going to get anything like this in this film. What the film wants to give the idea of is as soon as conception, you have a fully formed human. That's not what the reality is.
Okay, let me just ask you this, Maven. So I did this little digression where I put in the actual education portion. Why doesn't the church include any of this information in this anti-abortion screed? Why doesn't it want to educate young women who presumably are the target audience of this anti-abortion propagation film?
So, like I said, ignorance is one of the key components of being pro-life, and that's what I would say there. Ignorance keeps people here, and there's a reason why it's the same people who call themselves pro-life, again, who are claiming to care about the unborn, who are claiming to dislike abortions, but yet they are also the ones that will fight sex education, proper sex education, which has been shown to do more to prevent unwanted pregnancies, and especially young pregnancies, than anything else. Certainly better than abstinence only teaching. So if you would want to reduce abortions, that should be a good thing that you would want to get behind. Unfortunately, it's not. And yet another thing that has also been shown to reduce abortions is proper contraception and free and easy access to it. And that is also not what pro-life, at least in the United States, is about as well. They also hate contraception just as much. So it's all about you guarantee that more people are going to have babies than they can handle, and especially at young ages, when you do these kinds of things. And I think that is ultimately what pro-life wants. It's reproduction. Women are livestock. It's the babies that matter and the creation of the babies.
Okay, let's keep this review going. So instead of showing the proper development, instead what we show is blueprints. Why didn't we just show the actual development process? It's because the church is not interested in educating anyone about this issue. They're only interested in propagating their point of view.
But a blueprint will always be a blueprint, while an embryo is alive and can grow. All an embryo needs to grow into a baby, a child, and then an adult are sufficient nutrition, oxygen, and time.
Once again, we're going straight from fertilization to a baby and then an adult. We're not going to mention zygotes. We're not going to mention blastomeres, marullas. We're not going to mention the blastula. And of course, we're never going to say the word fetus. Absolutely not. That's unacceptable.
Looking back a few years, your body was once an embryo. You were given sufficient nutrition, oxygen, and time. This impatient little girl was born several weeks ahead of time. While doctors struggled to save her life, others caused the early birth of a little boy and left him unattended to die. In such cases, breathing is sometimes intentionally stopped.
Okay, let's talk about that. So we're trying to liken someone terminating a pregnancy to a fully born baby that is then intentionally abandoned and suffocated. Notice the analogy here. Notice that we're comparing these two things as remotely similar.
Right. For people who are pro-choice, it's birth is the key point here that we care about the most. Again, like I said before, it's not that we don't care about the unborn, it's that we don't care about them more than the human being that they are inside of. That is the human being, a fully developed human being, and they are not. After birth, they are. So to try to make that connection, that people who willing to get abortions are just as willing to murder kids, is not true. And in fact, being pro-life often means it's a guilt position. There are plenty of people who have children who are pro-life who are also child abusers. And that is very connected because honestly, it's coming from the same place. When you are pro-life, you do not care about the suffering that you are inflicting on another human being, even potentially their death, over the purpose that you think that they should serve. And that is what every abuse happens for the same reason, whether it's rape, whether it's domestic violence, you want to keep your spouse in line, or your children are being too noisy, you're causing pain and suffering deliberately for something that you get out of it. So there's one case, it's similar to Chad and Lori Daybell. I guess we could go there, but this is actually like an evangelical couple that had several children, 5 of them. And you can see in their prison interrogation tapes talking about God, talking about these demonic cops going after them because of religion and trying to take away their parental rights when they starved their youngest baby. So unironically, they were feeling persecuted for killing their own child. And I think the most interesting clip is when they get sentenced to life, the father's jaw just drops open, like he's astonished that he would get sentenced a life sentence for the murder of his own baby. So yeah, when you try to make that connection, it's just really, really unfair. And also it's pro-life policies that actually increase the chances of something like a baby being thrown in a dumpster or left in a bathroom. Pro-life causes that to happen more. So if you don't like that and you want to reduce the number of babies that die in horrible ways like that, you should be pro-choice.
Yeah, I
Again,
don't
we're
see
talking
any
about reality here. You can say, you can theorize all you want, and you can say you care about them, but I don't think you do if that's what you're supporting. I care about them much more than you. I'm very confident in saying, and that is why I am pro-choice. I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I don't see any connection between somebody who abandons a baby after birth and someone who terminates a pregnancy. These two things, in my mind, have absolutely nothing to do with one another. And the church wants to conflate the two things. I don't think that they're related.
Yeah.
Let's watch an extended.
If you bring up a comment like this, I have to talk about it. So we can star them and talk about them at the end. But if they come up, I'll come up. And so, Jared, I'm going to say yes. Not all rectangles are squares, but all squares are rectangles. All right. People who are pro-life are very comfortable inflicting suffering and even death on other people. That is no different than people who abuse children, who rape children, who abuse their wives, or family annihilators. They don't give a fuck about the suffering that they're causing to somebody. So yes, there is a reason why, so many pro-lifers will, and especially politicians, they can run on pro-life family stances, yet have, just like the Duggars, pedophiles in their home, pedophiles in their wards and congregations that they continually forgive and forgive and forgive and forgive, or make excuses for when they're caught. The family annihilator from Enoch had a long, wonderful obituary about what a wonderful dad and husband he was, what a great Mormon he was, how much he contributed to his community. When this motherfucker killed his wife, her mother, their 5 children, and then of course cowardly turned it on himself so he wouldn't have to face the consequences of his actions. That is from the same place. When you can just feel nothing about a woman suffering, it's just maybe you wouldn't rape somebody, Jared, but you are willing to do worse to them because of your views. So it's not really, you're not better. You're worse. I would say you're worse. The pain and torture that you inflict on somebody else, that is worse.
All right, let's keep this video going here.
Situation that this little boy faced in his life is absolutely horrific, but in no way is killing or murdering a born, breathing baby the same as what Dr. Hyatt, as I showed in that earlier article, faced in that CNN article. These two situations are in no way the same.
Abortions earlier in pregnancy are accomplished with instruments or suction equipment, like a small vacuum cleaner that empties the uterus, tearing the little body apart.
That's really tough for me to see that little hand on the screen, which is why I did not pause it when that hand was on the screen. Since 2000 in the United States, women now have the option of an abortion pill, which is available up to 11 weeks or 77 days after the first day of a person's last period. That was not available during this particular film.
Okay, Maven, why are they showing pictures of dismembered fetuses on the screen? What is the church trying to do with these shocking images?
Well, you said it there. It's the shock and awe of it. But honestly, most medical surgeries look like that. Birth itself is also a lot of shock and awe. But they're not showing that, of course, which they very well could, but they're deliberately not showing, the bloodiness of that. So yeah, it's just emotion baiting.
Exactly. They don't want to show the pictures of the stages of development, but they do want to show pictures that are intended to traumatize people. Let's keep
Right.
watching.
A girl talking about abortion said, "It's my body. I can do anything I want with it." But what about her baby?
Some say, as did the Supreme Court of the United States, that it is only a theory that human life is present from conception. This is contrary to insurmountable medical evidence.
Here we have James Faust here. This is from his particular general conference talk, which was in April of 1975. We have an old white male with no medical background and no real history of working with those who are facing these choices. That's an interesting choice for an abortion education video. But as women have no real authority in the church, I guess it's the best that we're going to get, right? Why did the church release this video in 1976? Normally, a video of this kind would be shot the year prior and then it's released afterwards. So if you think about the time frame of 1973, 1974, this is when we had Roe versus Wade take place in the United States, which essentially legalized abortion in most cases. I think that this film strip is a direct response to Roe versus Wade. Faust here, he seems to really be arguing for personhood. That's the idea, is that a personhood is when is the moment that a human is first recognized as a person? He seems to be arguing the idea that it happens at conceptions. Take a look at the human embryo on the right. Does that look like a person? And this is very important here. Why are we using, as Faust says, medical evidence? Why not just ask God? It seems like a really important question. When does life begin? But Faust, he just dodges it, and he says that there's insurmountable medical evidence that it begins at conception. If a fertilized embryo is a person with a soul, then why don't we bless fetuses in the church and give them a name? If an embryo or a fetus is a person, then is the church arguing that a woman who terminates a pregnancy should be tried for murder? Why is he using medical evidence? You are the prophet, the seer, and the revelator. Can you just please tell us what the answer is? No.
Way back in the 16th century, Arandius showed that maternal and fetal circulations were separate, thus clearly demonstrating that there are two separate lives involved.
Before birth, a baby responds to cold, sound, touch, and pain.
Here are the scientific facts concerning gestational development and the capacity for pain. The science conclusively establishes that a human fetus does not have the capacity to experience pain until at least after 24 to 25 weeks. Every major medical organization that has examined this issue and peer-reviewed studies on the matter have consistently reached the conclusion that abortion before this point does not result in the perception of pain in a fetus. And remember, the vast majority of abortions take place well before the 24 to 25 week time frame. The film in the previous section, it uses the nebulous term that babies feel pain before birth, because it does not want to talk about the time frames that are involved. And at no time does the church or the film want to talk about a fetus not being a fully formed autonomous human being. If you say that babies can feel pain after a certain point, it puts into people's mind, oh, are there certain steps along the development of the human life in which certain features are not available, or where a fetus couldn't feel pain, or where a baby's heart isn't beating, or where a baby can't think? No, they don't want to put that into our minds. Again, we've seen this time and time again in this film. From the moment of conception, you have a fully formed human. That's really what the film is arguing for.
She kicks.
I'm pausing again to address DL. There is a reason that societies that are patriarchal have high rates of domestic violence, femicide, child abuse, including child sex abuse, also child murder or neglect. These are pro-life places. Pro-life is always tied to misogyny. It cannot be pro-woman. It never will be. It's inherently contradictory. So no, when you again, it's just there's this real disconnect from reality here. When your policies cause more children to be abused, more children to suffer, to die, to go through all manner of awful things, you are not a pro-child or a pro-family person, period.
Okay, very well. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going here.
Should
Appreciate
we,
people out in the live
should
chat.
we answer this question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the question is, would the wider audience benefit from the definition of abortion? It seems they're very ignorant comments from individuals that have a very narrow definition. Yes. An abortion is a termination to a pregnancy, period. So there's no such thing as a post-birth abortion, for one. That is one lie that's happening. A lot of people think that an abortion for medical necessity is not an abortion. It is. If you are terminating a pregnancy for any reason at any time, that is an abortion. So
Okay,
I hope
that's
that clears
exactly
that up.
right. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's 100% with you, 100%.
Drinks, hiccups, sleeps, and wakens.
Dr. Bernard N. Nathanson helped set up and became director of the first and largest abortion clinic in the Western world. After the center had performed some 60,000 abortions, Dr. Nathanson resigned as director. He said, "There is no longer serious doubt in my mind that human life exists within the womb from the very onset of pregnancy."
Let's just discuss here Bernard Nathanson, American medical doctor and the co-founder in 1969 of the National Association for the Repeal of Abortion Laws, later renamed the National Abortion Rights Action League. He was also the former director of the New York City Center for Reproductive and Sexual Health, but later became an anti-abortion activist. He was the narrator for the controversial 1984 anti-abortion film, The Silent Scream. I remember watching this movie when I was a kid because I was born in the 70s, and this was a really kind of a traumatic film for me.
Hi, sorry, I'm addressing this comment. Pregnancy and childbirth is literally torture if it's against somebody's will. I don't know why it's really hard to understand that. Maybe let's take BDSM flip. If you were into that and you are choosing that, maybe you can handle all kinds of whips and chains and pain and have a really good time with that. But if you just take somebody off the street and you've put them through that without their consent, that is torture. I hope that helps.
That definitely does help me.
Many doctors, especially Nathanson's fellow obstetrician, the film, meaning The Silent Scream, has provoked an outcry. The problem is that it is factually misleading and unfair, says Dr. Richard Berkowitz, professor of obstetrics and gynecology at New York Center's Mount Sinai Medical Center. The fetus in the film appears to be acting in a perfectly normal fashion, but that's technical flim-flam, and they use misleading film shots to represent the fetus, and they give the impression that the 12-year-old fetus is as big as a full-term baby when in fact is only 2 inches long. Why are we relying on someone who's not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, someone who's extremely controversial, and someone whose film has been thoroughly and severely critiqued, has been saying that it is misleading and medically inaccurate? This is a very, very strange bedfellow for the church.
So why, let me ask you, put that question to you, Maven. Why would the church team up with this Dr. Nathanson who has very sketchy history? His films have been critiqued as being inaccurate, and he's not even a member of the church. Why would the church want to team up with someone like that for this issue?
The church has never been original. If you're inside the church, you might think that what we're getting from our leaders and prophets is unique, or they're directly getting it from God, when really they're often just getting it from other evangelicals. So they ride the wave of whatever panic is going on. So if it's video games are causing children to be violent, or the devil is in heavy metal music, whatever it is, the church is also literally just the same. And again, they don't care about data. it's the ignorance piece. They don't care about information. They care about production. I guess they care about what they can get out of women.
Got it. Let's keep it going.
Why is Faust, who is a prophet, seer, and revelator, quoting Nathanson about when life begins inside of the womb?
Exactly.
There's no doubt in Nathanson's mind that life begins at conception. But who cares what this terrestrial-bound doctor thinks? We have prophets, seers, and revelators who can tell us the mind of God. You don't have to rely on Nathanson, whose works are extremely controversial, and a lot of people in his own field discredit him. Why is he being trotted out in general conference? But James Faust, he won't tell us when life begins. He won't tell us. He'll say that medical evidence indicates it, and this weird doctor believes it, but he won't tell us what God thinks about it.
When a sperm penetrates an ovum, a new human body begins.
I'm out there, Mr. Narrator. A new human body can begin, but it doesn't have to. I mean, some sperm are defective, for instance. A human body, we're really skipping. We're going from a sperm and an egg straight to a human body. There's nothing in between. Don't worry about what happens in between. Don't worry about it.
Complete with all the genetic inheritance of the mother and all the genetic inheritance of the father.
Plus some genetic mutations from DNA, but we don't want to mention that because evolution, that's just a theory.
But some still rationalize abortion by noting that each baby adds to the billions of people already in the world.
Who is arguing this? This is a straw man argument that the film is going to go to great lengths to refute and just easily bring down. It is a straw man. No one is arguing that.
We are told the world is running out of room, with the population doubling every 30 years or so. Certainly there are some really unfortunate conditions.
Uh-oh. What's are you seeing the private
No.
chat?
Yeah, sorry, that was just for you. I
Oh.
wasn't sure if you were seeing or not.
Yeah, I'm seeing the chat. Yep.
Okay.
Are we going to keep going?
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay, here we go.
But what do you think about the amount of room available as you look across the countryside,
Huh?
especially across the vastness of the world's sparsely settled regions? Let's suppose, for example, that all the people in the world were divided into groups of 5, and that each group had a 2-acre plot of land.
What's with the circus music?
How much land would be needed for all the world's people in this example?
Nice music.
All of the continents? No. One hemisphere? Too big. North America? Still too large. Theoretically, 2-acre homesteads for each 5 persons in the entire world could fit in an area the size of the United States, leaving the rest of the world completely uninhabited.
First of all, nice circus music to go along with this abortion video. Nice touch. This entire discussion is a red herring. It has almost nothing to do with the reasons that people need or seek abortions. But to address this film's pointless line of reasoning, the problem with the entire argument is that not all of the world is actually habitable. Almost no one lives in the Sahara Desert or in vast quarters of the Arabian Peninsula or in Antarctica or in Greenland or in the desolate Pacific Islands, which are becoming uninhabitable due to climate change. This entire thing, it makes no sense.
Another rationalization for doing abortions is the matter of feeding everyone.
I seriously question whether most people who have had an abortion are concerned with feeding everyone. In fact, let's take a look here at the reasons that people actually do have abortions. And I have this from the National Institute of Health. So let's take a look at the reasons. Is it really because of lack of space on Earth or because of problems with feeding everyone? Women's reasons for seeking an abortion fell into 11 broad themes. The predominant themes identified as reasons for seeking abortions include financial reasons, timing, partner-related reasons, and the need to focus on other children. Most women reported multiple reasons for seeking an abortion crossing over several themes. That's 64%. I'm not seeing what the film is arguing here as the typical reasons that people are seeking an abortion.
Okay, so let me just pause it for a second. So the church has trotted out two reasons that people seek to have abortions. Or number one is that there's a lack of food, and number two is that people fear that there's a lack of space. How do you feel about the church's reasons that people are seeking abortions so far?
I've never heard anyone express that that's why they sought an abortion. Um, so that would be my first thing there. And then again, I just want to bring it back to we're talking about bodily autonomy and human rights. We're talking about forcing someone to go through torture and possibly death against their will. That's the horrific thing about this, period.
Okay, very well, very well. Let's keep it going here.
There are definite problems. There are starving people. But wouldn't some other solutions be better than mass abortions?
Why are we talking about starving people? This is another huge tangent. But if you want to talk about starving people, what I would suggest, you use some of Ensign Peak to solve the world's hunger crisis. In fact, the UN told Elon Musk that he could solve the starvation problem. He said the UN said that only $6.6 billion could basically solve world hunger, which we know that Ensign Peak is worth 100 to 150 billion. So instead of the church opening and operating hundreds of massive temples, the church could build hundreds of food shelters, and the church could redirect its proselyting mission force to man those food shelters and supply lines to solve world hunger. So, is that what you really wanted to talk about, Mr. Narrator? I can talk about it. I don't know what this has to do with abortion, but I guess we can discuss it. I don't know what the point of it is.
Perhaps a beginning would be to teach people around the world about growing and using a variety of nutritious foods. And have you noticed how much food is being thrown away every day?
That's sad, but what in the name of Zeus does this picture have to do with an abortion?
To this, the large amounts of grain and other food eaten by rats, or
Rats? Rats? Did he say rats?
left to spoil.
We're talking about rats and spoiling food. I'm going to see these straw men that are put up by this film time and time again. Reasons that women have abortions. Let's get this from another source. Results. The reasons most frequently cited for women having an abortion is that having a child would interfere with a woman's education, work, or ability to take care of dependents. That's 74. That's the number one reason. That she could not afford a baby now, 73%. That she did not want to be a single mother or was having relationship problems, 48%. Nearly 4 in 10 women said that they have completed their childbearing, and almost 1/3 were not ready to have a child. Fewer than 1% said their parents or partners' desire for them to have an abortion was the most important reason. Younger women often reported that they were unprepared for the transition to motherhood, while older women regularly cited their responsibility to dependents. You know, I didn't read anything in there about rats.
By reducing this waste, and by improving the ways food is distributed, millions more could be well fed.
Okay, and I just have to pause here again. The key word here is could. This is again where we have a disconnect between an idea and reality. The reality is that food insecurity, you increase food insecurity. Again, starvation, neglect of children, these all increase with pro-life policies and abortion bans. So it's just really astonishing to me that people will argue for something when the cause, the effect of their voting and their supposed morals is the exact opposite of what they claim to care about. I did want to address a couple other comments here. Kevin Wright says that Christ himself said through prophets that abortion is evil. I would like you to prove that. What prophets? I mean, God also told prophets like Joseph Smith and Brigham Young that it was okay to have child brides and fuck teenagers. So they kind of don't really have a great track record here. But while I'm bringing it up, I will say, again, maybe not all pro-lifers feel this way, but this is, it is the same vein when you just view women as fertility objects, as breeders for children. There's a reason why pedophiles are also highly likely to be pro-life, and men who try to justify why it's okay to find teenagers attractive by saying that teenagers are the most fertile and that's their ideal time to be impregnated. Those are pro-lifers, And they're wrong because, again, the ignorance, their bodies are still, teenage bodies are still not fully formed. They are not the most fertile or the most prime time for girls to be pregnant. And in fact, it is one of the biggest causes currently worldwide for teenage girls to have an abnormal, early, preventable death. It would be through pregnancy. So I'm just going to lay that out there like that. And then, Alan, I'm sorry that you're offended by my swearing, but again, we're talking about the use of people's bodies against their will in ways that are painful and torturous and can end their lives. And so I don't feel sorry for saying fuck you, just like I don't feel sorry for saying fuck you to anybody like Joseph Smith who thinks it's okay to fuck a 14-year-old. Just fuck all of you. You can say that ruins my argument, but I don't care.
Yeah, bad language doesn't have anything to do with an argument. So
Yep.
it has absolutely. And they said that Jesus said something about something. We don't have any good evidence that Jesus said anything about abortion. And even if he did, there's no good reason to preference his supposed opinions. There's no reason to appeal to him as authoritative whatsoever. Why should we care what Jesus allegedly said about anything? That has yet to be demonstrated. Until such time as it is, then there's no reason to appeal to it.
Also,
And just think about the extensive...
Sorry, go ahead.
I would say God is the biggest abortionist of all, and non-consensually. He aborts or miscarries because that's him. That's in his hands. He's the one, if you believe in a God, he is the one making that choice to end pregnancies for women who want those babies. So yeah, it's kind of ironic when people try to use religion. But besides that, God loves killing children. It's all over the Old Testament. Not only did he tell Abraham to kill his son, even though he didn't make him do it, in the end, you are supposed to want to or be okay with that. And that is why some religious people who are not mentally well have killed their children, including Chad and Lori Daybell, because they see something more righteous in that. So again, and it's this religion that sees children as tools or objects the same way that it sees women as objects. And that's why pro-life is abusive towards women, and pro-life societies in general tolerate a lot of abuse towards women and children. It's always connected. It absolutely is. I know Jared said, correlation is always causation. I know he was being sarcastic there. I don't care if it's causation or not. The correlation alone should be very telling. So also God had bears come out and kill 24 children just for calling an old man bald. God did nothing when it came to, I forget the guy's name, but he sacrificed his daughter because he promised God he would. And God didn't step in, maybe because it was for a girl instead of a boy. So yeah, God is quite the child killer. So it's and Christianity is based on God sending his son to be killed, knowing that he'll be killed. So maybe you could say God didn't do it himself, but he fully knew that was going to happen. So it's literally a child killing cult. That is the basis of Christianity. Period.
Well, if you think, there's been approximately 120 billion humans who have ever been on this planet, and if a third of all pregnancies end in end in a miscarriage, then you would have another 60 billion that have been miscarried. So we've had 120 billion humans who have lived and 60 billion miscarriages. I mean, it's incredibly common. God is allegedly the most pro abortion person that has ever lived. That's a lot of miscarriages. So yeah, I mean,
and that's also why we're seeing when, women who are getting arrested over miscarriages, abuse of a corpse is actually, it's one of these kind of like backdoor ways to put women in jail for things that aren't their fault. Women have tried to go to hospitals when they've noticed that they're miscarrying and have been turned away, some more than once, and suffer the consequences at home and just genuinely don't know what to do. So again, that's pro-life is always misogynistic at heart, always. And it always causes unnecessary suffering to women, even according to you guys, you're innocent women, you're responsible women who want to have kids. It hurts and kills them too. There's no exception for pro-life women to avoid the consequences of the misogyny of the pro-life movement.
Okay, let's keep it going.
Tracts of land being used to grow useless or harmful things, such as tobacco, opium, and grain to make alcoholic beverages.
Useless things like this entire section of the film.
And how about the vast uncultivated lands just waiting to be watered, fertilized, and planted wisely with selected strains of crops?
Now I'm trying here, folks, to just imagine myself being pregnant in 1976. It's almost impossible for me to do, but I guess I can try. It's the best I can do. Imagine being pregnant while someone is showing me in the back of a church of this film strip, while the narrator is showing me opium fields in Afghanistan, discussing fertilization tips, lamenting rats eating spoiled food, and just thinking to myself, what the heck?
Even in times of disaster and famine, would there be a reason to take away the lives of unborn babies?
Way to tie it in there, Mr. Narrator. But to speak to his point, yeah, what if during that disaster or famine, a 7-year-old girl is raped by her father? What if during that disaster or famine, a mother learns that she's carrying a seriously malformed fetus who would not be viable after birth? What if during that disaster or famine, a pregnancy jeopardizes the life of a woman? I could go on.
There can be enough food. The Lord has said, "For the earth
Can
is
be.
full, and there is enough, and to spare."
Pause.
Life.
The Lord said there's enough and room to spare. Okay, that doesn't help the dead kid that starved to death. I don't know why people think they can just say stuff like that. There's enough food, then just carry on. Like children are not actually dying from the lack of food. It's insane. It's stupid. It's stupid.
Well, it really gets to the church's privileged position because these general authorities are well compensated individuals and they're typically businessmen, lawyers. They have a lot of money. They have no idea what it's like to live in a situation in which you have food insecurity. And that's something that you've discussed on your podcast. And quite frankly, something that I've talked about as well. These people have no conception of that. So they're putting out these red herrings and saying, well, I have enough food, so everyone must have enough food. And as we pointed out, the modern church has enough food to really end the hunger crisis on this planet. Now, back in 1976, they didn't have enough to do so, but they could do so now, and they've chosen not to do it.
Maybe the chat can help with there's a charity that was literally started by Latter-day Saints to help starving Latter-day Saint children because they were not getting enough food, and bishop storehouses weren't helping them. It's in poorer countries, like Africa, just outside of the U.S. in general. Not that there aren't also Mormon kids in the U.S. that aren't having their needs met, but most certainly in other countries, the church has just not prioritized. There's been extremely stingy with help given there. So yeah, Latter-day Saints had to start their own charity to feed their own children because apparently tithes and fast offerings were not enough for that, and they've since expanded, so it's not only LDS anymore. And I think they've worked something out with the church because you have to go to archived pages to kind of get that story. It seems like their website's been scrubbed a little bit clean. But yeah, again, it's the same thing. When people want to say, or like Flip just said recently, no one's trying to control women's bodies. Like, yes, you fucking are. That's the result of that. That's what all of this is about. This is the intended consequence. So to tell me not to be obtuse, it's insanely ironic here. We don't want to control women. We just want to put laws in place that prevent them from being able to have access to healthcare. We don't want to control women, but we're just going to tell them to stop having sex, even though married women who are mothers, who want to be mothers, they are also being affected by this, but we'll just pretend that it's not happening to them. It's just, or my dad was like this, like, I believe women should get an abortion if her life is in danger. Well, my dad sat through the funeral of a good Mormon woman who was doing the right thing, whose pregnancy killed her. So his opinion does nothing to get her out of the ground. It's just, this is what gets me. And I people want to be upset with me that I'm upset about this. Again, it's just this. I need you to look into yourself and ask yourself why you don't care, or why you don't care enough about these things happening. You can say that you don't want a 10-year-old to have to give birth. Yet, you're pro-life, but you think they should get an exception. Well, then why are they giving birth? These laws are purposely preventing that and putting obstacles in the way. If you actually want a woman to be able to get an abortion to save her life, there needs to not be obstacles. It needs to be open. Politics need to get it out of it. You need to get the fuck out of it, because it's not you, it's not your family, it's not your body, it's not your child. It's none of it has anything to do with you. You are just inflicting pain and suffering on women and children just for your own fucked up idea of morality. And it's not okay. It's not okay. People, you know what? There are people who even today justify homophobia, and they don't care about the suicides that are happening. They don't care about families ripped apart, you know, by this ideal of the traditional family. They don't care that, you know, supposedly for a traditional family you know, cult, that they're kicking out their children when they either don't align sexually with what they think they should do, or refuse to go on missions, or just don't line up in some way. Kick them out of the house. That's not very pro-family. So again, it's just lies. It's words that don't reflect reality.
Yeah, there's definitely serious harm that comes from the church's actions here and also the church's inaction here. Everything that is involved with this has real life consequences, especially for the women that are involved.
Is precious.
Agreed.
Each person is unique.
Except for identical twins.
Each person is important. Yet innumerable girls and women are having abortions every day. Perhaps one of them is someone you know.
Okay, now we're about to come up to one of the biggest straw man arguments in this entire thing, this mystical experience of this young woman. And by the way, this is a spoiler alert. This is literally the only woman that we're going to hear from in this entire short, is this alleged story coming up. So let me get your reaction to this story, this mythical, legendary tale of a woman who's going to regret an abortion.
4 years ago, I had an abortion. And it's something that I'm never going to forget, something I have to live with. Everybody was having it done. The friends that I had that I talked to said that it wasn't going to be a big deal.
She says here, everyone was having it done. Seems really unlikely to me, especially in 1976. I would just say her friends told her wrong. It is absolutely not something to be taken lightly, and I'm sorry to hear that she was misled.
Okay, so
that's very nice of you. Yeah. If
Yeah.
we're giving the benefit of the doubt and we are saying that this potentially is a real person, I'm very skeptical of that. But yeah, even giving her the benefit of the doubt there, it's just, again, I think this is just another point of misogyny, because I don't think the story is real. Because first of all, to get an abortion because everybody's doing it, like, did she get pregnant too also because everyone's doing it? Like, is that the thing? It's funny to see how the tactics of whatever is scaring a society it is the same, because we're hearing that today about you know, trans children. Like, it's the trend to just say you're the other gender, or it was the trend to be gay, and that's why, like, we need to suppress gay people, like, from being teachers or working in public places or being in any kind of public spaces or figures, because the children might, you know, think it's trendy to be gay. It's just so dumb. So it's trendy to get an abortion. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I haven't had an abortion myself, but I have never ever heard a woman talk about an abortion flippantly like that and say that it doesn't matter, or that it wasn't a difficult decision to make. This again is the misogyny. Men just love making women out to be completely stupid. And that's part of the design. Again, that's the misogyny. And that's part of the excuse of, like, this is why we need to take control of this. This is why we need to stop women from being able to make decisions about their bodies, because they're stupid and they obviously can't be trusted with that. We must be trusted with it, you know, for them, and be able to decide for them, because they're lower than us as far as intelligence or anything else goes. It's this kind of thing. And I mean, Brad Wilcox even did this recently when he said he was talking to somebody who left the church and asked him why he left. And he's just like, well, you know, everyone else was doing it, so I just thought I'd be cool and leave the church. It's bullshit. It's bullshit.
Yeah, and they never are going to show a quick anecdote of a woman who said, well, I needed to have an abortion to save my life because my life was literally going to be lost if I didn't have an abortion. I guess we're not going to show her. And we're definitely not going to show the women who actually died because they didn't have access to the. We're not going to show an interview with her because she's dead because she had no access to proper abortive and reproductive services. So we're not going to show her. Instead, we're going to jack up or gin up this incredibly this woman here. We're not even going to show her face. We're literally going to like dehumanize her. We never got to see her actual face. And this is the only woman that really talks in this entire anti-abortion screed. It's a disgraceful example, in my opinion, where she brings out all of these straw men. Well, everybody was doing it and things like that. This is absolutely reprehensible. Every argument that we've had in this film strip so far has been a red herring. The lack of food, rats eating things, not enough arable land, people growing crops, and all of these straw men and all of these bad arguments is the best that the church can offer. So it's a disgrace of a film.
They also don't talk about the women who regret being parents. And there's far more of that. It's been taboo for a very long time, but more and more women are finding the ability, and it's allowed to start being talked about more. And especially like in fundamentalist religious spaces that are women spaces where it feels safer to talk about these things and admit these things. You can be a good mom and never have wanted to be one. You could also be a bad mom and never have wanted to be one. So again, they won't talk about that. There are plenty of children who know very much that they were not ever wanted. And so, and they had horrible, neglectful, abusive upbringings. And some even have their parents, their mothers say, like, I should have aborted you. You've ruined my life. You this and that and that. And the reason why they had them in the first place is because they were pro-life and they felt like they were supposed to. They were supposed to take responsibility. And then they inflict that resentment for the child that they didn't want on that child. So
I'll just say one other thing. They're also not going to have the interview with the woman later who says that I was forced to carry a non-viable fetus who was already no way that it would be born alive. I was forced to carry it to term because I did not have access to reproductive rights for months on end at a time. Because again, that's terminating a pregnancy. That's technically an abortion. They're not going to show any of these interviews with any of these people. They're only going to use this fake interview with something that really propagates their particular worldview. It's pretty lame.
I'm going to bring up another comment, actually.
Okay.
Jared says, I don't think you're stupid. I just think a fetus is a person. Again, I don't care how much you want to think a fetus is a person. The issue here is that you think they're a person more than the actual person that is growing them. And you give personhood to the fetus by taking it from the person whose uterus they are in. That is the issue here. And I don't believe, again, I'm going to bring in the hypocrisy because I believe, Jared, that you love your wife very much. And I think if her life was in danger, you would want her to have an abortion, a safe one, to keep her. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong, because a lot of men find women to be quite replaceable. So you have at least one son with her already. You can always marry another woman who doesn't die in childbirth. But I think, when it comes to women that you love and care about, then all of a sudden you're willing to flip it and be pro-choice, and you're caring more about the person who normally you're just seeing as a vessel to another person. That's the issue here.
Yeah, I disagree with the personhood argument for quite a few reasons. Number one, like I mentioned earlier, we don't bless children in the church as soon as they're conceived. Why? Because they don't have personhood. We can't drive in the HOV lane if you're a woman who's pregnant, because again, that's not personhood. Though, a fetus is not counted as a person for tax reasons and many other reasons. I don't believe in the personhood argument because I think it's a bad argument anyway. That's my thoughts on it. But let's keep it going here. We got to get through this one.
Yeah, it was a big deal. But it's just, living with it. Nightmares, guilty feelings. You think back of what happened and how old the baby would be and what kind of person it would be.
Same as parents who've killed their children.
I'll never get over this. Never.
I question greatly whether this story is from a real person. I mean, for me, that seems like the film strip was showing multiple different people in the section. I'm not sure because they refused to show her face. in this section, we are going to talk about somebody who didn't think it through, right? And did it for purely elective reasons. We definitely aren't going to show a vignette of a woman who needed an abortion to save her life. No way, we're not going to show that.
Abortions are not as safe as some would have us believe.
The claim here is that abortions are dangerous. So I want to discuss this. This is from NPR's website, 7 persistent claims about abortion, which are fact-checked.
Okay, let me just, before I get into those facts, Maven, are abortions dangerous? Because that seems to be what the video is insinuating.
They are not more dangerous than pregnancy. There's no such thing as a safe pregnancy. Abortion does have risk. It is a surgery, and obviously the later the abortion, the higher the risk, and the more pro-life policies are in place, the more later abortions are forced to happen, because again, obstacles are put in the way of women getting abortions earlier. And again, that also includes in cases where a woman's life is in danger. So Jared said that, yeah, if his wife's life was in danger, so he agreed. So again, we're agreeing here that he's very hypocritical about when he's okay seeing, the full human as the person, or the fetus more as the person. He's willing to flip-flop for the woman he loves. But again, not all fatalities in pregnancy give you a telegram announcing ahead of time. So there have been many women who have just barely been lucky enough to be brought back from the brink of death when they could have had just a very safe procedure and have been in and out the hospital in one day. Instead, they lose fertility or lose a lot of blood, go into sepsis, spend weeks in the hospital, and maybe even literally die on the table and have to be brought back, because it pushes, pro-life is extreme, and it pushes women that far to have to do that. So not only are, in general, pregnancies less safe than an abortion, but even more so in pro-life societies that put bans on abortions or put obstacles in place. Those make pregnancies across the board more dangerous for every single woman. So again, it's just the disconnect with reality here. Jared, if your wife ever needed an abortion, I hope she could get it quickly and in time. I hope she wouldn't have to be like Kate Cox and like take it through the courts all the way up to the state Supreme Court and still be denied. And I hope she would still have time to leave the state or leave the country, if that's where we're going, to get the health care she needs. But all of the suffering that she would go through, and you would have a first row seat to that, you would be watching it happening. And I just would want you to know that your morality, your morals put her there. That it's not a bug in the system. It is a feature of the system. These will always be part of pro-life societies. Unnecessary suffering of women and women you love.
Right. And what we see with the church in this particular, what we see with the church in this particular section is that it is going to once again use fear tactics, which are divorced from reality, in order to try to shame people into not having abortions by insinuating that having an abortion is much more dangerous than carrying a baby to term. And I'm about to debunk that concept very significantly, because it is far more dangerous to continue a pregnancy than it is to have an abortion. The church is just being very disingenuous here. Let me just break down a couple of stats for you.
So if you scroll down here to the claim that abortion is dangerous, pregnancy and childbirth are far more dangerous than getting an abortion, according to data from the CDC. So the pregnancy-related deaths per 100,000 live births. So for every 100,000 live births, about 17 mothers are going to die. Regarding abortion-related deaths per 100,000, it's less than 1. So it is far more dangerous to carry a baby to term than it is to have an abortion. And also, as far as complications are concerned, there are far more complications in carrying a baby to term than to having an abortion. So this claim is abjectly false on its face.
Bleeding, sterility, emotional upset, difficulties in subsequent pregnancies, and even death are some of the possible complications. But what about rubella or German measles?
Huh?
This is less frequent now because of the vaccine.
There's a vaccine here for
Vaccines
rubella
work.
vaccine. It is very dangerous for a pregnant woman and her developing baby. Anyone who's not vaccinated against rubella is at risk of getting a disease. Although rubella was declared eliminated from the U.S. in 2004, cases can occur when an unvaccinated person was exposed. So back in the 1970s, there was no vaccine for this, of course. And what would happen is if the baby contracted rubella, you could get some of these birth defects here or other serious complications from deafness, cataracts, heart disease, intellectual disabilities, low birth weight, glaucoma, brain damage, thyroid problems, inflammation of the lungs. It was a pretty serious deal.
Shouldn't an abortion be done if rubella occurs within the first 3 months of pregnancy? This baby's mother might have had an abortion, but she didn't, even though rubella occurred during the 2nd month of pregnancy. What about the baby? Watch her grow, perfectly well and healthy, as a delightful little girl and teenager. As in most cases of rubella in pregnancy, she has had no problem at all. Abortion because of rubella?
This is another massive red herring here. Not one of the babies that faced prenatal health obstacles that we've seen in this film, there's been a couple of them, including this girl. Not one of them and she had rubella apparently. Not one of them died. Not one of them was born with any, not even serious problem. They weren't even born with even a minor problem. Everything just magically works out for everyone in this film. Who, as long as you bring your baby to term, everything is going to be magically perfect. If your baby is facing a life-threatening health challenge, everything is going to work out. There aren't going to be any problems for anyone. Everyone is going to live happily ever after. What a relief to not have to worry about a baby who may suffer for months or even years with a horrible quality of life. Whew, we're not going to need to worry about that.
I'm going to say too, like, I mean, that was a great point already, that it's always the miracle stories that the church talks about. Elder Anderson gave a talk, I think maybe 18 months after my sister-in-law's sister passed away from her pregnancy. He talked about a woman who had 4 very difficult pregnancies, decided she was done, and then had 2 more difficult ones, and then now she's got 2 more babies. She could have also left 4 children or 5 children, or 6, all 6 without a mother. So, my sister-in-law story is not going to be told over the pulpit in a general conference. I also, my oldest niece is severely disabled. She is a pro-choice child because they knew that there was an issue. It was brought up to my sister-in-law that there were severe complications with my niece, and I would have supported her either way. And she wanted to still have the baby. And now that she's here, I love my niece. And I spend as much time with her as I can. And I've even been a caretaker for her before. So again, but one of the things that I used to do, I would pick her up from school. She went to, when she was younger for a while, she went to an entire school that was for special education for children like her. And our family is lucky, I think, first of all, that there aren't other children in that family. She's the only one. Because she does not do well around other children. She will push them or pull their hair. They can't have pets for the same reason, because she will hurt them. This is also something that's not brought up, and it should be, because you parents have a duty to all of their children. So when you take that chance and you end up with a child who is dangerous to your other children, you could potentially lose your children, again, either to violence or death, or have them be abused in ways that you just can't help because again, you're spread too thin. There's all kinds of complications that happen. And so it's got to be a choice. And the sad thing is, not all parents are equipped to even handle quote unquote normal children, even less so children that have a lot of needs and need a lot of attention. It is a fact that disabled children by far are abused at much higher rates than normal children. They are sex trafficked more often. They're neglected more often. They struggle to survive or thrive. Like they will have early deaths more often. So again, it's just, people need to be prepared and want to take that on. And if we had a society that was a lot more helpful, people could take on a lot more. But I have seen, and again, this is like from the school, so many of these children's families ripped apart by their disabilities. And like more often than not, It was the father of the family who just couldn't handle it anymore and would skip out, leaving the mom, not with just the disabled child with the severe needs, but with all the other children too, to just completely fend for herself. So again, there's nothing pro-life about this, forcing this onto people, especially if they can't cope. So we're just making sure that even more vulnerable children have horrific outcomes. So again, we're talking about reality versus your theory. This is the reality.
What we're talking about is the reality, and what the church brings out with example after example is absolute fantasy. This is before we had a lot of the vaccines that we have today, and when these children who had these particular issues, their quality of life could be absolutely abysmal, where they would have absolutely every hour of their brief existence would be filled with pain and horror, or they would be completely non-viable. But what the church shows time and time again in this film is that don't worry, absolutely nothing will ever happen to your baby who has serious issues if you just trust in the Lord. But that is not the reality. What we have here is a fantasy version of what a pregnancy could be, and it fails to actually it fails to deal with any of the elephants in the room time and time again. It just brings up all of these straw man arguments. So it's a really obviously a horrific film.
No, sir.
Good night, Mom. And Mom, thanks for everything.
You're welcome. Oh, sorry.
Children are so precious. How could anyone have an abortion?
So I guess we're just not going to deal with rape, incest, serious fetal anomalies, or a pregnancy like an ectopic pregnancy, which often threatens the life of a mother. Instead, we're going to deal with food shortages during disasters, acres per capita on the earth, rats, rubella, famine, Afghanistan opium, and red herrings. We are just not going to deal with the real reason that women have abortions. Instead, we're just going to shoot down all of these just bogus arguments. Sounds like a plan.
Human life is too priceless to be cut short. What a contrast. Giving birth or having an abortion.
Are there any medical reasons to have an abortion?
I'm going to pause. DL, are you confused about what marital rape is? Do you feel like that because somebody has gotten married, they have consented to any sexual use of their body by their spouse? Do you feel like it's not possible for a spouse to be made to have sex against their will? What's the question here? I'm hoping that they will answer.
Yeah, whatever.
Oh, and Flip. Fuck you. Oh, marital rape. What about it? Fuck you. Fuck you.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you've had marriage with someone. You need to have consent for all consensual sex activities. It doesn't matter whether you're married with someone or not. It doesn't matter what your previous agreements are. You have to have consent for every single new sexual activity that you have with anyone. So that's the answer to that question. Let's keep this going. I mean, this is a really bad film. It's going to get worse. Believe me.
Stop the press. Stop the press. Hold on, brothers and sisters. Take those names off of their prayer rolls. I stand corrected. Maybe. Let's see here. We could be getting somewhere. Hold on to your seats. And while you're at it, drop a like, drop a subscription.
Many doctors who have given this question much careful thought feel that medical reasons for abortion are almost non-existent.
Okay, almost non-existent is not, I repeat, not the same thing as non-existent. So apparently, there are some medical reasons to get an abortion. I just can't wait to hear what some of those might be. But spoiler alert, we're never going to hear any reasons that can legitimize an abortion in any way, shape, or form. It would have been nice to know what those medical reasons were. Remember, this is not an educational video. This is a propaganda piece. So like Elder Boyd K. Packer taught us during his famous speech to the CS instructors at BYU, not all truths are useful. So we're not going to find out the truth of what those almost non-existent medical reasons are now. And why are we turning to medical doctors for the answers to these ethical questions when we have Spencer Kimball on Earth? He says medical doctors think it's almost non-existent. President Kimball. It's sorry.
When it comes right down to it, the real reasons for most abortions are immorality, embarrassment, inconvenience, or selfishness.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with this one. It really infuriates me to hear this film inventing nefarious reasons that women have abortions that do not correspond with reality. I want to bring you another story about a woman who had a pregnancy who decided to have it ended early. This is from USA Today, published in 2012. Doctors say abortions do sometimes save women's lives. When a pregnancy must be ended before a fetus is viable, quote, the result is an abortion, end quote, says Vanessa Cullens, Vice President for External Medical Affairs for Planned Parenthood Federation of America. But he says there are also cases after viability in which an abortion is safer than an induced childbirth or surgical delivery. Let me give you the story here of a Cecily Kellogg, who's 44 years old, a writer who lives near Philadelphia. She says that was the situation she faced when she was nearly 6 months pregnant with twin boys in 2004 and developed severe preeclampsia. One fetus had already died. And, quote, my liver had shut down. My kidneys had shut down. And they were expecting me to start seizing at any minute, end quote, she says. The doctor said that they had to quickly dilate her cervix and perform an abortion to save her life. Quote, I fought it, she said, but they told me I would die. It was either me and my son or just my son. And this is after already one baby has died. This is not immorality, embarrassment, inconvenience, and selfishness. These are real issues that people are facing. And to smear them in that manner really, really upsets me.
Wouldn't a
Okay, I have some things to add to that. First of all, Flip thinks that I misunderstood him. I meant what about it, as in what's that got to do with what I asked? I wasn't dismissing it. Please apologize. I'm sorry. It really looked like that. Let's bring up your comment again. Oh, marital rape, period. What about it? Please answer the following question. And then you ask it. I that looks pretty dismissive to me, but what do I know? I want to talk about inconvenience, okay? Because it's really, again, this is the misogyny piece here. It's not just in birth, but reproduction and any kind of pain women experience in general, just medically, has been far more neglected than it has been for men. And my best friend started her period at 11. She had extreme PCOS. She bled more days than she didn't. She would have debilitating cramps that made it difficult for her to finish school or to even keep jobs at times. And the number of times that when she brought this up to doctors, they just dismissed it as just like normal period cramps, like for most of her life, is just insane. Or the fact that when women have procedures done, like having IUDs put in or removed, they aren't given anesthesia. They're just told this is just a pinch or it's just some pressure. You know, when we're talking about pregnancy, we're talking about 9 months of growing a human, if everything works out okay, and then either needing to be cut open or split open through your genitals to deliver that baby. And I just can't imagine that if I did that to any man, let's just skip the whole growing part of it, just cut him open to be able to have a newborn baby or force one through their genitals. I highly doubt they would have the audacity to call that an inconvenience. It's gross. It's gross. I mean, and just think about it. Just put inconvenience in for everywhere. My sister-in-law's sister died of inconvenience. Teenage girls are dying of inconvenience across the world, you know, for their age range than any other normal cause of death for children. Like it's inconvenience. Okay. Piece of shit. And
Yeah,
I'll bring up my dad again one more time. Okay. COVID. My dad was one of these guys that was anti-mask and anti-vax. All right. And it was enough that literally the idea of being told to wear a mask when he didn't want to, or get a little jab with a little needle, was enough to literally compare himself to Holocaust victims. So there's just something insane happening here when men like my father will see a shot as Holocaust level persecution, and yet having a woman grow a human and force it out of her genitals. They know, these guys see labor They know how painful it is. They've seen their wives crying and screaming and all of this stuff, and they dare call that an inconvenience. When you compare those two, that's again the misogyny. It's just that like women's suffering doesn't matter, or just again, women going through something that puts their life at risk and has historically killed them at higher rates than anything else. You call that an inconvenience and dare to look down on women whenever, like for any reason, to have an abortion and just be like, they're just trying to avoid an inconvenience. But heaven help you if you want me to wear a mask in public. I would call that an inconvenience, but this is insane entitlement I think men have about their own autonomy. It's very, very precious to them. But women's, they don't care.
Well, I'll just jump in. Joe from New York City, he put this out, because in Louisiana, that's one of the regressive states where you don't have any access to abortion at all. People are having to travel long distances, and they can't even get the ultrasounds or anything else that they need for these services. So they found out afterwards that the baby didn't even have a head because all these clinics that have provided these type of services have been totally shut down. That's far from an inconvenience. That is absolutely, it can be, life-changing for people.
It is torture. It causes trauma. It damages women and their spouses and other children for life.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep it going here.
Better answer be adoption?
It's hard, Mr. Narrator, to put a baby up for adoption if the dangerous pregnancy kills mom. It's kind of hard to put it up for adoption if the mom's dead and also the child along with her.
Loving parents adopted this precious baby, thanks to a young mother who let him be born.
But because abortions are occurring, loving couples who want to adopt babies wait and wait for babies who never seem to come.
First of all, I would like to say that I have been a foster parent to 2 children. I know in part what it's like to kind of be like this couple on the screen. Not all the way, but at least a little bit. So yes, there is a difference between adopting babies. There is quite a waiting list for babies versus adolescents, not quite as much. And older children, 15, 16, 17, that's who I was the foster parent for, was older children. People generally don't want to adopt those 15, 16, 17-year-olds. They really want a baby to start off with. So yes, there is a difference in between the two, something I know firsthand.
And all this little person needed.
Oh, sorry. Let me just ask you a quick question here, Maven. What about the argument here that people say, well, just bring the baby to term and then give it up for adoption? That's what the church seems to be making an argument here. This is okay. Maybe it's too early in your life, or maybe you don't have the means to take care of it, or maybe you just don't want to have a baby brought into your life. Why not just bring it to term and then put it up for adoption? That's what the church's argument is here.
Again, there's no such thing as a safe pregnancy. You're still forcing someone to go through bodily harm against their will. And then adoption is not the end all that they think it is. First of all, it is available. It was available. My uncle has 2 children that he adopted, and that was all before Dobbs. So to pretend like nobody ever puts children up for adoption, that's just not reality. Again, pro-choice is about the choice, and there are women who will choose to do that. There will always be women who choose to do that. Hell, there's women who choose to go through pregnancy as surrogates specifically to give other people a chance to have children. So we don't need to mistrust women or act like we have to force them all to give birth to children because no women will choose to do that. No, women will choose to go through it for somebody else even. This is, again, just stop trying to control us. And Flip, I don't know what kind of ignorance it is to try to pretend that this isn't about controlling women. Again, when that's literally the point of all of these things. When you say here, when I say women suffering doesn't matter, that's a persecution complex based on sexist conspiracy theory, it doesn't matter. That's why these things are happening. If it mattered, they would be treated. I don't know. Again, there's just a disconnect in reality. And so for people like Flip, I think Flip has made it pretty clear that he's a misogynist. So his ignorance, I think, is willful. It's willful. I can't help you. And you can't help it when people are misogynistic. So he claims to be on the left. He claims to be pro-abortion rights. He certainly has a lot to say against it, but whatever. His wife left him, and he's having a real hard time with that. But I think we can all understand why. It's just, God damn it. Why are women being turned away? Okay. Why are women dying? Why are women going into sepsis and being turned away from the hospital and then passing out at home bleeding? If their suffering mattered. I can't help you, dude. I can't help you.
Definitely. Keep on going.
Generally don't want to adopt those 15, 16, 17-year-olds. They really want a baby to start off with. So yes, there is a difference in between the two, something I know firsthand.
And all this little person needed to become one of those special babies would have been sufficient nutrition, oxygen, and time.
It's very hard for me to see that on the screen there. Before we get to Spencer Kimball, this is from the CDC here. CDC abortion surveillance system stats. So the CDC has been looking at the number of people who have had abortions for quite some time. So let me just read you this one particular sentence, paragraph here. Similar to previous years, in 2019, women in their 20s accounted for the majority of abortions, about 57%. The majority of abortions in 2019 took place in gestation. That is 93% of abortions were performed prior to 13 weeks gestation, which we saw that fetus, by the way, in that last little scene. That would have been maybe a 12-week-old fetus. So 93% of abortions take place before we get to that stage. A smaller number of abortions, about 6%, are performed at 14 to 20 weeks gestation, and even fewer, 1%, are performed after that.
My dear young people, there are two very important things I need to say to you about abortion. First, abortion is wrong.
Abortion is wrong. In all cases, blanket statement, no nuance, that's it, end of story. Why is the rest of the video here then? If abortion is wrong, why are we covering all the rest of the famines, the nuance, the possible medical complications? If it's wrong and he gives no caveats, no loopholes, no way out, then that's it, video over. What are we here to discuss?
Abortion is one of the most revolting and sinful practices in this day, when we are witnessing a frightening increase in permissiveness leading to sexual immorality. How could anyone submit to, encourage, or participate in any way in such an evil act?
If my wife or daughter were pregnant and the pregnancy threatened one of their lives, I think that they would consider it, and I certainly would consider it as well, although it wouldn't be my decision. I think that most people would. Okay, how can you consider it? Well, if your life is on the line, you might want to consider it. That's...
Second, to those who have so sinned, there may be a way back. Not easy, but there may be a way. While forgiveness may be possible, the road back is long and difficult.
Okay, so there may be a way back. You can't tell us for sure. He said maybe in that section 3 times. Will God not tell his prophet whether an abortion can be repented of, or is he just playing coy with us? He knows, but he won't tell us. Either way, it's not good. So this is from the church's policy.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. So some people are not familiar with it. That's President Spencer Kimball, which was one of the church's prophets there, and he weighs in on this particular video. And what Spencer Kimball does in this particular clip is he won't tell the women who are there showing this video to whether abortion can, quote, be repented of or not. He leaves it ambiguous. Why doesn't he say whether abortion can be repented of, Maven? Why does he punt on this issue, just like the church punts on every important issue in this? Why won't he tell us?
I suspect that there is no connection to God here, and it's just a man talking about what he wants.
Yeah, and he also really wants, in my opinion, I think that's a good point, but also he wants to leave it ambiguous in a person's mind of saying, well, if I have an abortion, maybe I can't be forgiven. Maybe I can never, regain my presence with God again. So he wants to use as many fear and shaming tactics as possible to hammer this home. And he won't tell these people whether you can actually repent of abortion. And in the church's manual, they've kept that same language in there and kept it ambiguous as to say, we don't know if you can repent for an abortion. They're trying to guilt trip people into carrying babies to term.
And they will.
We'll see on that.
By the way, I had one of my converts on the mission in answering the pre-baptism questions admit to having an abortion.
Right.
And so I think there's different standards for when you're wanting to bring somebody into the cult. okay, it's not a good thing, but we can forgive you for it. Whereas if you're born and raised in it, I think the consequences would be more severe, potentially disfellowship or loss of membership. But when we have a chance to pull somebody in, different standard.
Yeah, I was a missionary as well, and I had an investigator who failed the interview questions to become a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and there was only 3 ways that you could really fail the interview. One was being trans, one was committing a murder, and one was having an abortion, and I was almost positive that she had had an abortion. She had to meet with the mission president, but she eventually did get clearance to be able to go through. Let's keep this review going.
So I'm going to come back to this from the Church's Handbook of Instruction. It says, as far as has been revealed, a person may repent and be forgiven of the sin of abortion. So, I mean, as far as I know, this is the only sin that God keeps close to the vest by not telling us whether a person can repent of it.
Right.
President Kimball and the church, even today, won't tell us for sure if abortion can be repented of.
Do not be deceived. Wickedness never will lead to happiness. Some of God's most sacred commandments are violated when a person trifles or interferes with any of the processes of reproduction.
No test tube babies, no in vitro fertilization. If you have an LDS couple who's having difficulty with having a baby, they can't have in vitro fertilization because that's trifling with reproduction, right?
Right.
That means no birth control as well.
Right.
No condoms, no vasectomies, no IUDs, and also that means no fetal surgeries. That's trifling with reproduction.
Right.
So if your baby is having a serious issue, you shouldn't have a neonatal surgery because that's trifling with reproduction. And are midwives okay? Because they are also interfering with reproduction. They're trying to get the baby to be born, but that is interfering. And what about prenatal vitamins? Is that interfering with reproduction?
Yeah, so this is a really important point here, is that the church at this time was against the contraception, and it was against all these things. Everything is just supposed to be taken naturally. We're not supposed to have any medical intervention whatsoever into this process. Not any interference is considered against what God is supposed to have us do. We're just supposed to let nature run its course and not interfere with it. And that's even more harmful than the stance that the church has today. It's an absolutely reprehensible way of approaching this issue.
Because letting nature take its course also includes letting a woman die, even if you can save her. But because you can at least say that God did that. Whereas if you save her by doing anything that could affect the fetus, which is just about everything, especially if a woman needs life-saving measures, you don't necessarily need to perform an abortion to save a woman's life. You do if it's because an incomplete miscarriage has happened, and that's what's causing the sepsis, and it's literally rotting inside her and poisoning her body. If it's cancer, chemotherapy is going to affect the fetus. Surgeries can affect the fetus. Most medicines will. So this is what we saw with the Idaho doctors and other doctors in states that don't want to, literally don't want to save a woman's life. If they are going to, anything they do is going to terminate the pregnancy, because to them, they're the ones interfering. Whereas you just let the woman die or let her get close and then try to bring her back. That's God doing it, I guess. But I guess God's okay with you trying to pull her back, but just,
Yeah, these are supposedly people who are pro-life. We're saying we're pro-life and that we're just supposed to let nature take its course and not use modern medicine to intervene, not have in vitro fertilization, not have, condoms, not let anybody control anything about this process whatsoever. This leads to death. This leads to suffering. This really has to stop. So,
and I just want to point out too that when men don't want their spouses pregnant, they will often kill or harm their spouse to prevent the pregnancy as well. So again, this is more of the hypocrisy. And Jared even showed this as well. Like he's against women being able to make this decision. But if his wife needs it, he's comfortable with that. So he's okay approving his wife's abortion because that's coming from him. But he's not okay with women making that choice because he feels like, I guess he says he doesn't think we're stupid, but again, this is just where words aren't matching with reality. Why do you think that your word matters more than the person who's more affected, whose body is affected when it comes to medical decisions? If you don't find some superiority in your opinion and control over that person than they have over themselves. Just period. I do want to say, like, women already, if when it comes to homicide, it's going to be more likely a partner than a stranger. It's far less likely someone's going to jump out of the road and kill you. Your husband, or your boyfriend, or your stalker, that you're trying to reject. These are the men that are most dangerous, and are going to kill you. And pregnancy increases a woman's chance of death by homicide from a domestic partner. So again, if you're calling yourself pro-life, but what you're voting for, the policies you're putting into place, is putting more women in danger of being killed, it's not pro-life. And this, we also saw this in Texas, right? So we've had several women in Texas, like Kate Cox, have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court and still be denied the procedure that she needed. I think there was a lawsuit of 4 other women who had serious complications because they weren't able to get abortions that they needed, either coming close to death or losing fertility or becoming disabled, because of the level that their either sepsis or whatever was going wrong was allowed to go before they received help. And they lost. They tried to sue the state, but the state's really awful. There was a man who ordered mifepristone and poisoned his wife with it. He gave it to her without her knowledge or consent, induced a miscarriage. He got a slap on the wrist, 3 months. Meanwhile, Ken Paxton, I think he's the governor,
Attorney General.
Attorney General. Thank you. Literally wrote letters to hospitals, all hospitals in Kate Cox's area, threatening them with prison, I think up to 99 years if anyone helped her have an abortion against his will. So again, how is that not men exerting significant, deliberate control over women, like, to their harm? And again, this guy didn't care about this husband. Again, he just gets a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, it's absolutely tragic. And the most important thing here is that there is absolutely no good reason to appeal to Spencer Kimball for any of this. He has no expertise in this field, and he won't even answer the most important questions that he's supposed to, as a prophetseer and revelator, be able to answer as to when life begins, if you can repent, and how to do it. He punts on everything and just appeals to non-Mormons for everything. I mean, what good is he in this situation? Absolutely nothing.
Babies, very much alive. A baby may seem noisy and always in need of something: food, time, help, love, and many other things. But someday she will grow up, and maybe she'll say,
"Good night, Mom. Mom, thanks for everything."
All right, so we are definitely, it's some really odd music. This is really light music for an abortion video, whatever. We're not going to show a woman here on a hospital bed in agony while a dangerous pregnancy threatens her life. We're not going to show a 7-year-old girl here with a big belly who's been raped by her father. We're not going to show a baby with a malformed cranium who has no quality of life and won't live more than a few days. No. We're not going to show that. We're only going to show that everything is going to work out really, really well.
Yep.
The film seems to be making the implication that abortion is against the 10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
But President Kimball didn't say that. So is abortion the same as murder?
Right. So really, I just put the film pauses on the "thou shalt not kill" in this particular section, but it doesn't have any verbiage to go along with it. It just wants to insinuate that's the same as murder, but they won't come out and say it. Talk about punting on the important issues. This film punts time and time again on the things that actually matter.
They know they can't. They know they can't. And it's just they want to exert as much control over this as they possibly can. And so, honestly, I really feel like this is why my sister-in-law's sister died. Because as a good Mormon woman, especially when all you hear, like, first of all women have really difficult pregnancy stories. That is a very common thing for women to talk about with each other. But then when you also combine that with a religion that tells you your entire purpose and reason for existing is childbearing, and not just that, but it's the only way to be happy. So, if you don't have children, fuck you if you're infertile and you're trying, but you will definitely be miserable and lonely and all this kind of stuff, because nothing can compare to having children. It's just, and then again, these faithful stories of like, oh, difficult pregnancies, but then it all turns out okay. I think my sister-in-law was trying to do the right thing. She was trying to be a good woman. I do think she wanted to be a mother. But just with this difficult pregnancy and with so much taboo, I don't think she would have felt comfortable even considering an abortion without a doctor telling her for sure that she was going to die. But doctors can't know that. There's nothing in the uterus or on the baby or anything that shows, a little countdown clock of when, it's all going to be over. So as difficult as it was, I don't know that she was ever told, like, I mean, it was a high risk pregnancy, but was it like, this is an 85% fatality for you? Because that's really high. And maybe she would have been able to make that decision. But again, like, it comes across as seeming faithless, you're not having enough faith in God.
Right.
If you do that, again, unless it's if it's a topic, I think those women in a way are lucky, because those are just automatically known to be, they are survivable, but it's extremely rare.
Dangerous.
They are
very dangerous.
they're fatal the majority of the time. It's a miracle if you survive one.
Right.
And so those ones are easier ones, and they happen early on in the pregnancy usually too. So that it's also easier psychologically to just be like, okay, I can do this. But again, when the further along you get, the more dangerous it gets. I feel like for women to really have a choice in these kinds of difficult situations, I mean, not only do they need to not have the legal obstacles there, putting red tape in front of them, just increasing their chances of disability or death by having to jump through hoops when they're already very, very sick and something very wrong is happening, to put them through an obtuse legal system with red tape against misogynists that don't give a fuck what's going to happen to them, or that they're exceptions, whatever, they don't care. It's just, I really think that beyond removing those obstacles, we need to have respect for that. I wish we had enough respect for children, that we didn't just call them an inconvenience or see them as a rightful punishment to having sex, or just, it's such a low bar to inflict on children, households and parents that aren't ready for them, that are maybe too young, maybe too immature, maybe just, that won't be able to feed them. Risto made a comment about shaken baby syndrome. That is one of the most significant ways that children are brain damaged or killed very young. But yeah, I just wonder, like, why do pro-lifers never care about the conditions that babies are coming into the world? And we didn't even talk about like fetal alcohol syndrome or babies born addicted to drugs. They will have extremely difficult lives, because it messes with their brain, it messes with their physiology. They are far more likely to be depressed. They're far more likely to just struggle. They're far more likely to be neglected and abused. And again, when you already have a parent that's not capable, who's been a drug addict, to give them a more difficult child, it just compounds.
Right. But what the church wants to do, in, like we said, in every single one of the cases here, even if they said that there was something seriously that happened because rubella or any of the other fetal abnormalities, every single example showed that baby, once it was carried to term, had absolutely no problems. There's nothing for you to concern yourself with.
Miracle.
Just bring your baby to term and everything is going to work out, completely divorced from the fact that if you have these incredibly difficult pregnancies where the fetus is going to be almost non-viable, and then the baby's going to have an incredibly poor quality of life, and every moment that it lives in its brief existence will be filled with blood and horror. It's never going to deal with those in any meaningful way, and it punts on every issue time and time again. And in fact, like in this last clip here, it won't come out and say that abortion is murder, but it's just going to insinuate it. So there, you imagine that you're a young woman in the 1970s in the back of a Mormon chapel in Utah, and I don't know, you've been raped by your uncle. You're sitting here watching this, and they're saying, "Oh, thou shalt not kill." Oh, if I have an abortion, that's the same as killing That's the same as murder. You're putting an incredible strain on these individuals, and this really affects women in the church who, like I said, had pregnancies that could threaten their life. Well, they say, well, if I terminate this pregnancy, I've committed murder. It's the same. Thou shalt not kill. That's what I saw in the film. Imagine sitting there. I mean, the harm that this film has inflicted and continues to do so is absolutely immeasurable. We gotta keep going here, Maven. We gotta keep going. I know you want to jump in, but we've got to finish up this film.
Or you're just going to imply it. You're not going to tell us. You're just going to imply it. Let me quote to you Exodus 21:22 through 25, since you brought up the law of Moses. I'm going to read it from the American Standard Version. And if men strive together and hurt a woman with child so that her fruit depart, and yet no harm follow, he shall surely be fined, according as the woman's husband shall lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if any harm follow, then thou shalt give life for life, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. What this passage from Exodus shows is that the Bible is making a distinction between a fully human life, because if you murder someone in the law of Moses, you're to be put to death. But in this case, if you harm a fetus and the fruit departs, meaning that the baby is not born, then you are fined. So even the law of Moses, even the Stone Age ignorant tribesmen of the law of Moses understand the concept that a fetus or a clump of cells is not the same thing as a fully formed human. And that is something that the filmmakers do not want to acknowledge in any way. But even the law of Moses gets this right, and the film doesn't.
Wow. Yeah.
Heavenly Father, thanks for a home and all good food, and especially thanks for Mommy, because she let me be born.
All right, so this is the last line of the film. This is the guilt trip line. We're going to drill in the guilt here on this last line of the film. Thanks for letting me be born. It's the last words that a pregnant mother who you'd be screening this film to would think about after having watched the film, screwing in the guilt trip on her. Thanks for letting me born. Somebody obviously coached this young boy into that particular prayer.
Because what was choice. It should say, thanks. I'm glad that you were forced to have me be born, whether you wanted to or not.
Right. Exactly.
Letting implies a choice. I wanted to bring up when we talk about these stories, the non-miracle ones where a child is severely disabled or suffering, and it's impacting the family, because that doesn't fit the narrative, especially in religious communities. And again, I saw this so much at the school that my niece went to with other disabled children. It's not just fathers that abandon the family, but a lot of other community members and family members too. These people, the more difficult their child is to be around other people, the more isolated and alone these families tend to get. And again, it just pushes them into even more desperate situations, and they're less likely to get help from the church community because they don't want to deal with that and they don't want to see that. So they will actively try to pretend that these people and these families don't exist, or that there's always, you can always blame them for sin, for something, or not enough faith. Maybe they didn't have enough faith for the child to turn out okay, or maybe they were spending too much time on the child and not their wifely duties enough, and that's why the father left. It's just, there's always ways to usually blame the woman for the desperate situation she's in, because nobody else wants to help her. So
yeah, there's going to be a lot of blame that we're going to see in this next section as well, because even though the film is over, there was an audio portion that went along with this, depending on whether you are a member of the church and whether you are not a member of the church. And we're going to get to hear Spencer Kimball give some more intimate thoughts. And so I give a review to that as well. We're almost done. It's like only got about 15 minutes left. So let's hear what Spencer Kimball says in the audio only portion.
That was for the non-member audience. What I want to discuss now is this is the Visit with a Prophet here, which is with Spencer Kimball, that is designed for the LDS audience. Okay, so stay with me here. This is still very, very important stuff. And because President Kimball, he speaks so slowly, I sped it up to 1.25.
A Visit with a Prophet. President Spencer W. Kimball.
My brothers and sisters, I want you to know that abortion is wrong. We counsel girls and women never to consider having an abortion.
Never, ever? even if the pregnancy will kill her?
We also counsel our doctors and nurses not to perform nor assist in performing abortions.
If all doctors follow that counsel, then many women will choose to have life-saving abortions performed by unqualified hacks, which will lead to really scary consequences for both the baby and the mother. It's really dangerous counsel.
We admonish parents and priesthood leaders to firmly oppose this revolting and evil practice. Anyone who is a party to abortion, including someone who might influence a girl to have an abortion, is an accomplice to a grievous sin and stands in great need of repentance. Such persons should be called to account by their priesthood leaders. Now I know that in some cases, some so-called experts and others try to make abortion seem proper. Many young people and even some parents have been confused and misled. Many others feel that abortion is wrong, but may not have had all their questions answered about it. May I discuss some of these questions?
Please do, because the Very Much Alive video that we just watched, it did not cover any of the real questions at all. Instead, it offered up bogus red herrings and non sequiturs. And of course, President Kimball here, he's going to diss the people who undoubtedly know more about the medical aspects of abortion than he does by calling them so-called experts. These are the people that we are trusting to bring, when your wife or your loved one has a baby, they go to the hospital. No, they're just so-called experts. The irony here is that Kimball is supposed to be the expert on divine forgiveness. Remember, he wrote The Miracle of Forgiveness, but he still won't say if an abortion can be forgiven. He won't tell us.
One question applies to the consequences for a person who's had an abortion or who has been a party to one. As far as the church is concerned, the consequences are serious indeed. Repentance for such a grievous sin is not easy. An absolutely necessary step is confession of the sin to one's bishop, who can help along the road toward repentance. Members of the church guilty of being parties to the sin of abortion must be subjected to a proper court of the church as circumstances warrant.
Must be subjected to a church disciplinary council. If you have an abortion or if you encourage one, you must. I just want to discuss this. Let's, for instance, that you're pregnant here with, you have a normal pregnancy here, which is where you have.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to point out that at this time, child molestation and also like beating and raping your wife, those things were not things that required a disciplinary council.
Yeah, it's amazing what requires a disciplinary council around here and what doesn't. That's for sure.
Yeah, and can I know you want to get to this point, but the reason why I am pro-choice is because, again, with the more that I've learned, the more obvious it is that it's better for society, women and children especially, like most of all, more than anybody else, are served better by a pro-choice society, one that respects consent, one that respects autonomy, one that is horrified at the idea of forcing people to go through painful, torturous things against their will, whether that's sexual things or whether that's birth or just physical things. You know, some people we've seen in the Olympics make punching each other in the face a sport, and that is fun for them, and they've done it a lot to be good at it. But doing it to somebody else when they're not ready and it is not fun for them, this is assault. This is abuse. Consent is everything to do with positive outcomes versus negative outcomes. And I don't know if I can say exactly what the causation is. I just know that the correlation is, again, with pro-life societies, whether religious or not, it's going to be misogyny, femicide, domestic violence, child abuse, child neglect, trafficking, human trafficking of adults and children, just neglect, poverty, crime, educational outcomes, health outcomes for children. These are all worse. They're all worse in pro-life societies, and you can even see that already in states. So if you line up the states that have the worst educational outcomes, guess what? They happen to be, I guess it happened. Again, we're talking correlation. I don't know what the causation is, but the correlation itself should be something to think about, that the states worst in education are also the strictest on pro-life stances. It's just, it's just all together. So if you really think that you're protecting children, you are ignorant. You do not understand the data. You have not looked at the data. And so that's why maybe you don't get it. Maybe you disagree when pro-choicers say you care about the unborn and you stop caring about them when they're born. Maybe you don't feel that way, but your voting record is the evidence that tells on you. So you can say all day long, you can talk till you're blue in the face that you think children who are raped should be able to have abortions, that you care about children, that you don't want them abused. But when the consequences of your policies have the opposite effect of what you say you are intending, then you have to ask yourself, why is that? And why don't you care? Why don't you care enough to switch on this? Why are you okay with being wrong? I guess, or why are you thinking like it's better to be right when other people are harmed, while pretending that you care about them being harmed?
I'm sure you will definitely explain all that to us in your new YouTube channel,
Yes.
Dear Pro-Life Dad. I'm sure that we will get a good education there. Let's we just got 2 last clips to get through on this one, and then we gotta end this live stream. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to any call-ins because we're going kind of long. But let's finish off what Spencer Kimball has to say about this one.
In the Washington, D.C. area, I met an investigator. Everything went well. She loved the church. She loved the gospel. She wanted to get baptized. We ended up baptizing her and a couple of her children. In the baptismal interview with the elders level, it turned out that she had had an abortion, and that required a higher level of interviewing. But eventually she was allowed to join the church, even though she had an abortion.
Another question has to do with whether persons who've had an abortion can be forgiven and how they could repent fully after such a serious sin. To every forgiveness, there is a condition. The bandage must be as wide as the sore. The fasting, the prayers, the humility must be equal to or greater than the sin. There must be sackcloth and ashes. There must be confession of the error to properly constituted authorities of the Lord. There must be a restitution and a confirmed, determined change of pace, direction, and destination.
These folks really need a change of pace. They better make sure that their next pregnancy goes off without a hitch. You better watch that ectopic pregnancy. Maybe you should just concentrate. Make sure that pregnancy is not ectopic. This is from the same author that gave us the miracle of forgiveness. I mean, also, he says you need to make restitution. How do you make restitution for an abortion? How does that even make sense? Who are you supposed to ask for forgiveness? How are you supposed to make it up to someone? I don't understand.
Yeah, he dodges the question here. Once again, he won't say whether you can be forgiven of it. The miracle of forgiveness, he says you can repent in sackcloth and ashes, but he won't actually say whether that repentance can actually take hold and whether you can be forgiven. And that's reflected in the church's handbook once again, where it says, as far as we know, it can be forgiven. In other words, there's an equivocation here. The church refuses to take a position on whether you can be forgiven of abortion, and it insinuates that it's the same as murder in this film strip. It's using all of the cult shaming tactics possible to exert maximum control. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep on going. I'm gonna take my opportunity.
Conditions must be controlled and companionship corrected or changed. There must be a new consecration and devotion to the living of all the laws of God. In short, there must be an overcoming of self, of sin, and of the world. When persons can honestly say that they have done all of these things, then they may plead with the Lord for mercy in the hope of forgiveness.
Okay, but again, Kimball, he doesn't say that forgiveness can be obtained. You just repent in sackcloth and ashes, somehow make restitution for an abortion. I have no idea how that could possibly be a thing, but okay, you make restitution for having the abortion. You pray to the Lord. But Kimball, he doesn't say at the end that the woman will feel the sweet power of forgiveness and the atonement will wash over her. Instead, no, he just leaves us hanging. You go through all of it and you just have to hope. But we don't know. You may be able to be forgiven, but not sure. You go through all of it, and we don't even know, even with the current church policy, whether it can be forgiven to begin with.
Some people raise the question of the expectant mother's health in connection with abortion. There may be a very rare circumstance requiring life-saving surgery or treatment that may result in the loss of an unborn child, but such cases are rare and unusual. Even in situations such as these, no decision should be made without divine confirmation, following earnest prayer and consultation with the bishop.
Let's dissect this one as well. So you are in a life-threatening pregnancy that must be terminated or you will die, leaving your 5 young LDS children without a mother. And you consult with your bishop. Like, we're going to follow President Kimball's advice here. It says that you have, in these situations, you must consult with your bishop. And your bishop says, sorry, as the bishop in Zion, the Lord has revealed to me that you shouldn't have an abortion, but that you should die instead. Okay, really? Yeah, by the way, I'm sure that the pregnant woman's plumber bishop down the street, I'm sure he's well prepared to discuss these incredibly intimate and complicated medical conditions. I'm just sure that he's just all over it, right? If you look up abortion on the church's website, this policy of consulting with your bishop has actually been changed. It used to be that you needed to consult with your bishop to have an abortion, but that language actually in the last few months has been softened. It says those who face such circumstances should consider abortion only after receiving a confirmation through earnest prayer. Took the bishop portion out, so that policy has been changed. So, but still, even in these situations where life-saving surgery is needed, Kimball he still won't give it the go-ahead. Instead, he just hedges his bets. Everything is just ambiguous.
Occasionally, the question of pregnancy by rape will be asked. Medical evidence indicates that this is an extremely rare situation.
Understanding pregnancy resulting from rape in the United States. I'm sorry, all I have is United States data, but that's...
I'm just going to, unless you have a reaction to that, I'm just going to skip ahead to the conclusion, unless you have a reaction to what we just heard here, Maven. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead to the conclusion here. So here we go.
In the eternal perspective, such infirmities exist but for a moment.
This echoes what we saw in the film earlier. If a baby is going to have absolutely no quality of life, be in constant agony, requiring sedation every waking moment of its brief existence, have no prospect of being made whole, have no ability to discern right from wrong, and be doomed to a brief mortality filled with horror, suffering, and pain, that baby should be born anyway.
Yet some people would play the part of God and deny mortality to helpless children within the womb. And many that may be thought to be afflicted will be born without a blemish.
Yeah, we heard this sentiment also in the film. Don't worry if your child is going to be born with horrible life outcomes and will only live for a short period of time in pain, agony, and suffering. And will never know a moment's joy. Because it's always possible that they could be born without a blemish. It's possible.
Often the question is asked, what should unmarried parents do then? One of the most important things they should do is to seek help from their parents and their bishop. Loving parents and an understanding bishop can help them as they begin the vital process of repentance. They can then help the young unwed parents make eternal decisions. Whenever possible, unwed parents should marry and build a home. When this is not possible, adoption through church social services is preferred so that the infant can be sealed to loving, eager parents in an eternal family. A baby needs a family, a father and a mother. The Lord intended for babies to have a family and for families to be eternal.
Everyone will be sealed to everyone. Okay, all work is going to be done in the millennium. So from an eternal perspective, what is the point of encouraging the baby to be sealed to an ad hoc family? Because no matter what, that baby is in the resurrection going to be sealed to his or her family, right?
When the young man and woman create life by sinful behavior, the very least they can do to begin their personal atonement is to preserve the life of their child, whether or not they place the infant with adoptive parents. Another important thing each unwed parent must know is that abortion would only compound the problem, both here and hereafter. Abortion should not even be considered as a possible choice.
We keep coming back to this. Kimball, he's pretty clear in his opening statement that abortion is wrong with no caveats. That's the first thing that he said, and this is his conclusion, that in no circumstances should abortion even be considered. All the stuff in the middle, the flim-flam, all that, just the beginning, there's no abortion, and at the end, don't even consider it. It's not a possible choice.
All of us should remember that the same God who cannot look upon sin with the least degree of allowance is a merciful God who loves us enough to have sent a Savior, his only begotten Son, to atone for the sins of the truly repentant. Should there be any situation where questions have not been fully answered, You should consult with your bishop, who, with the stake president, could consult with the first presidency. The Lord loves us all and is kind and merciful. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
This is from the church's main webpage here on abortion, but I want to discuss actually from the church's handbook section here on abortion. This is from the General Handbook of Instruction 38.6.1. The Lord commanded, thou shalt not kill, nor do anything like unto it, Doctrine and Covenants, section 59, verse 6. The church opposes elective abortion for personal or social convenience. Members must not submit to, perform, arrange for, pay for, consent to, or encourage an abortion. The only possible exceptions are when pregnancy resulted from forcible rape or incest, a competent physician determines that the life or health of the mother is in serious jeopardy, a competent physician determines that the fetus has severe defects that will not allow the baby to survive beyond birth. Even these exceptions do not automatically justify abortion. Abortion is a most serious matter. It should not be considered only, it should be considered only after the persons responsible have received confirmation through prayer. Members may counsel with their bishops as part of this process. Presiding officers carefully review the circumstances if a church member has been involved in an abortion.
Right, that's an update.
A membership council may be necessary if a member submits to, performs, arranges for, pays for, consents to, or encourages an abortion. However,
yeah, just real quick, this is much more progressive than what we had in 1976. Kimball hammered home over and over again. He did not allow for any exceptions whatsoever. In the entire film, there was no exceptions. It didn't say if the mother's life is in jeopardy, no problem, or if there was incest or rape or anything whatsoever. So the church has come a long way from 1976 till today. And if you compare what the church's policies are against what we have in the post Dobbs situation, the church's position is actually far more open-minded than what we see in a lot of the most progressive states. I think we're going to end it right there. We pretty much summed it up.
But I have to push back on that because, again, I think it's where words conflict with actions. I absolutely believe that the church is behind the legislative attempts to make Utah just as restrictive as the worst of the states. It's only because of Planned Parenthood and injunctions to stop the trigger law that they put into place in I think 2020, so 2 years before Dobbs, suspiciously they got this trigger law in. So again, it's you can say that you agree with abortion in these terms, and at least I'm glad that it's in writing. But with most pro-lifers who say these things, they're not doing anything to actually open that way and make it possible. They're putting barriers in place for those women just as well as everyone else. I did appreciate KR Mello's comment here. I'll go ahead and read it out loud for anyone listening. I'm a medical provider and have seen miserable and horrible conditions that honestly really make me question a fair and just God. And he also mentioned someone else, and I texted her to get permission. So I'll show this comment here. It was up before. Remember the woman who went on Mormon Stories that had the children with epidermolysis bullosa? I might have butchered that. Sorry. She described their miserable condition, and they all died young, a short life of pain and misery. I would highly encourage people to see that. It's called The Belgian Mormon Story. I saw it multiple times through my work with Mormon Stories, and I cried every single time. The things that stand out to me about what she went through, and she was actually in the chat for a while. She left early, and I can understand probably a lot of this was maybe very triggering for her. But this skin condition, two of her babies had, 2 out of 3, made their skin just so delicate that just any movement, even breastfeeding, would cause their skin to tear open and bleed. When she talked about the things that people would say that there was a lesson to be learned, for her, or to teach her compassion or something. Her and her husband both had very strong reactions to the idea of any God that would cause that much suffering on such an innocent little child, just to teach an adult more compassion. It was insanely cruel, and that wasn't just the worst of the comments that people would say to try to make it feel better. I remember her saying that those 2 babies never smiled. When people would say well, remember the good times, there were no good times, she said. Their entire life was suffering, and everything she did to take care of them, to bathe them, to wrap them, again, to even feed them, caused them intense pain and suffering. And even her husband I thought was very brave and vulnerable to talk about this, talk about, trying to gently as possible bathe this little baby, seeing how much it's suffering, and as he's holding the baby's head above the water, genuinely feeling conflicted about if he was harming her more by trying to keep her head out of the water to keep her from drowning. Was he actually a worse father for that than if he just let her go under and she could be free? And I cannot imagine a parent having to think this or see this much suffering in a child to think that that's the most compassionate thing you can do. And I remember another thing that, the wife of this had said, that it just got so intense sometimes she would literally go into her closet and just scream until her voice and her throat was raw. She had said, if she had another pregnancy scare after the two, and this was in the 70s, she said, I would have gotten an abortion, even as taboo as that was, because I cannot see another child suffer like that. So these are the things people really need to think about, because it is pro-life that is causing children to suffer like this when you're putting barriers in place from them having a peaceful way to go. And again, like, the earlier you let that happen, the better for them, because the more they develop, the more pain receptors develop, the more their brain develops to process that pain. You are inflicting more and more pain the longer you allow children like this to suffer, and especially, till birth, if they're not going to thrive or survive. It's horrific, and I think only a sadist could do that.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Obviously, I'm the Padawan. You are the master. We're going to be looking forward greatly to seeing your new channel for your new podcast there. And can you give us the name of the title one more time of your new channel?
Yeah, it's Dear Pro-Life Dad.
I'm going to be looking forward to that.
Yeah, I wish I could have with my father about this. Yeah.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm looking back and reflecting upon that review, which was a couple of years ago, but I do like the sentiments and I do like how it stands up. I definitely could have recorded it, made it a little bit more high quality, but that was back when I didn't really know as much about content creation, but I do like the sentiments that I put forward. And I think I did a pretty decent job. I did a pretty decent job, so I'm proud of that work. And the Mormon movie reviews, we have new Mormon movies every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we have new episodes of the Mormon News Roundup every Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm so sorry we weren't able to get to any of the call-ins, but we will do again sometime soon. Good luck on She Became Visible, Maven. You're still on that program, and Latter Daily Digest, right?
Yeah, so with She Became Visible, I'm not as involved in that, but we are sharing a StreamYard. So thank you to Renee for that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, everybody.
And this
signing
was a tough
off.
topic, so thanks for everyone who stayed. Appreciate
Thanks a
it.
lot, everybody. Have a